Chapter 394. With the appearance of Shao Chen, everyone's eyes were fixed on him. At the same time, a murderous intent flashed in the eyes of the second prince, Chu Wushuang. Shao Chen was at the critical moment of breaking through to the Tao querying realm. He had no ability to resist at all. If he were to kill him now, he would most likely succeed. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Chu Wushuang was already prepared to make his move. Although it was clearly inappropriate to kill Shao Chen in front of everyone, Chu Wushuang hardened his heart when he thought of the great threat Shao Chen could pose to him in the future. Since such a person could not be used by him, he had to kill him as soon as possible. It was worth it to pay a price for this. Just as he was about to make his move, Chu Wuming had already brought his men to protect Shao Chen. Just now, Chu Wuming had inadvertently felt a trace of murderous intent from Chu Wushuang. Chu Wuming's heart raced. Naturally, he knew what this guy was planning. Therefore, without any hesitation, Chu Wuming brought his men to protect Shao Chen. Seeing Chu Wuming's actions, Chu Wushuang's face darkened. At the same time, Chu Wuming sneered and said, "Second brother, what are you trying to do? Don't tell me you want to kill someone in broad daylight?" Having already guessed Chu Wushuang's dirty thoughts, Chu Wuming naturally would not let him succeed. Chu Wuming would not agree to anyone who wanted to kill Shao Chen. In Chu Wuming's eyes, Shao Chen was irreplaceable. Personally bringing his men to protect Shao Chen, Chu Wushuang clearly lost the opportunity to make his move. Although Chu Wushuang could kill Shao Chen in front of everyone, he could not kill Chu Wuming in front of everyone. These were two completely different concepts. Coldly glancing at Chu Wuming, Chu Wushuang coldly snorted and didn't say anything. 2 hours later, under the protection of Chu Wuming, Shao Chen finally completed his breakthrough. His cultivation base had broken through from the full circle of the sky being realm to the entry level of the Tao querying realm. Shao Chen's strength had also improved significantly. Unlike the heaven tier, Tao querying realm martial artists were existences that had already touched upon the Tao. Not only could they fly in the air, but they could also manipulate the surrounding spirit qi for their own use. They were already able to mobilize the spiritual qi around them. As such, the attack power of a Tao querying realm expert was naturally much stronger than a celestial realm martial artist. This was a qualitative leap. Slowly opening his eyes, Shao Chen looked at Chu Wuming, who had been guarding him, and smiled. "Thank you, Your Highness. Brother Shao, you're too courteous. Some rascals wanted to do some improper things, so I naturally wouldn't agree." Hearing Shao Chen's words, Chu Wuming also smiled and nodded. Then, he looked at Chu Wushuang and sneered. These words were clearly meant for Chu Wushuang to hear. Hearing this, Chu Wushuang's face completely darkened. However, now that Shao Chen had completed his breakthrough, it wouldn't be so easy to kill him anymore. He had to find another opportunity. Therefore, Chu Wushuang didn't say anything else and left with the people behind him. With Chu Wushuang's departure and Shao Chen's breakthrough, the path of Tao could be considered to have come to a successful end. Shao Chen returned to the Human Academy Island with Chu Wuming. After 10 days on the path of Tao, Chu Wuming also told Shao Chen that the dozen or so young martial artists from the Heavenly Stellar Residence had already entered the Royal Academy and were now cultivating in the outer courtyard. After returning to the Immaculate Residence, Shao Chen immediately chose to go into seclusion. Having just broken through to the Tao querying realm, Shao Chen was also anxious to stabilize his realm. It just so happened that he had many good things on him that could completely stabilize his cultivation realm in the shortest time possible. He went into seclusion for 3 days. During these 3 days, Chu Wuming also came to look for Shao Chen several times. However, every time he heard that Shao Chen was in seclusion, Chu Wuming didn't want to disturb him. After 3 days, as soon as Shao Chen came out of seclusion, Chu Wuming received the news and hurried over. His expression was very anxious. Without any formalities, Chu Wuming directly explained. "Brother Shao Chen, I've been waiting for you for a long time. "Your Highness, is there something urgent?" Hearing Chu Wuming's words, Shao Chun replied with a smile. "Sigh, Brother Shao, you don't know. Today is my fifth brother's big day. Brother Shao has been in seclusion for the past few days. I originally planned to go alone," Chu Wuming said. The fifth prince was overjoyed. Naturally, he had to invite everyone. Chu Wuming couldn't be absent. After all, the two of them were blood brothers. Moreover, today, Chu Wuming, Chu Wuk, Chu Wushuang, and the other princes and princesses would also be there. Originally, they had planned to go alone. However, since Shao Chun had come out of seclusion, it was naturally better for them to go together. After all, the fifth prince's invitation had clearly stated that Shao Chun was invited. Hearing Chu Wuming's words, Shao Chun smiled slightly. He thought that it was something big. So it was just the fifth prince's big day. Since that was the case, he would go. Together with Chu Wuming, the two of them quickly left the Royal Academy and rushed towards the imperial capital. The location of the fifth prince's big day was set to be in the imperial capital's #1 restaurant, the Imperial Pavilion. The fifth prince's big day was set to be in a restaurant in the imperial capital. Shao Chun felt that it was strange. He also asked Chu Wuming who the fifth prince's wife was. However, regarding this, Chu Wuming shook his head and said, "I don't know either. I only heard that it was a woman that fifth brother brought back from outside." Even Chu Wuming didn't know who the fifth prince's wife was. This made Shao Chun slightly stunned. Logically speaking, the fifth prince's wife shouldn't be an ordinary person. However, even Chu Wuming didn't know who she was. This made him a little puzzled. As if he could see Shao Chun's doubts, Chu Wuming helplessly smiled bitterly and said, Brother Shao Chun, I don't have to tell you this. Brother Shao Chun, to tell you the truth, my fifth brother is good at everything, but he likes women. As for today's wedding, not only do I not know the identity of the woman, I haven't even seen her before. Moreover, my father doesn't seem to approve of it either. It was my fifth brother who was stubborn. However, I heard that this woman is extremely beautiful and has made my fifth brother yearn for her day and night. That's why my fifth brother is so stubborn. As they spoke, the two of them had already arrived at the imperial capital through the transportation array. There was already a carriage waiting for them. The two of them boarded the carriage together and headed towards the imperial palace. The imperial capital was still bustling with noise and excitement. Sitting in the carriage, Shao Chun actually didn't care about the fifth prince's big day. According to Chu Wuming, even Chu Mu didn't agree to the fifth prince's big day. It was completely the result of his stubbornness. However, an unknown woman was actually able to make the fifth prince fall head over heels for her. Shao Chun felt somewhat helpless. It was no wonder that the fifth prince withdrew from the fight for the position of crown prince early on. With such a temperament, it was indeed difficult for him to achieve great things. Shao Chun chatted with Chu Wuming idly as the carriage slowly passed through the streets of the imperial capital. After about an hour, the carriage slowly came to a stop. Shao Chun and Chu Wuming alighted from the carriage and looked at the extremely tall building in front of them. This was the location of the fifth prince's big day, the Monarch Pavilion. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 395. Looking at the Emperor Pavilion in front of him, Shao Chun smiled faintly. To put it bluntly, the fifth prince's wedding today was not recognized by the royal family at all. It could be said that it was a farce. However, the fact that the fifth prince was willing to go to such lengths for a woman piqued Shao Chun's interest. He wanted to see what kind of woman could make the fifth prince go to such lengths. Brother Shao, please. Just as Shao Chun was sizing up the Monarch Pavilion, Chu Wuming called out softly. Chu Wuming was obviously very familiar with the Imperial Pavilion. He had been here many times, but it was Shao Chun's first time here. As the most luxurious restaurant in the entire imperial capital, or even the entire Moonless Empire, the Imperial Pavilion had a great reputation. At the same time, it was indeed extraordinary. The monarch pavilion's main building had 9 floors. At the same time, there were more than 10 courtyards. As soon as they entered the monarch pavilion's main building, they saw a dazzling sight. This kind of decoration was not inferior to the imperial palace. Chu Wuming did not bring any attendants. As the two of them strode in, a beautiful maid took the initiative to welcome them. Without any introduction, the maid bowed and greeted. "Your Highness, Third Prince. Greetings to young Master Xiao." The maid even knew Xiao Chen's identity. This was the reason why the Monarch Pavilion was so outstanding. As a restaurant, the Monarch Pavilion had a perfect intelligence system. As long as one had a status in the Moonless Empire, the Monarch Pavilion would have a portrait of them. In addition, the Monarch Pavilion's fee was very high. Ordinary people could not afford it. Therefore, every guest who came to the Monarch Pavilion did not need to report their identity. The maid already knew who they were. She respectfully bowed to the two of them. In response, Chu Wuming nodded slightly. Then, the two of them walked to the main courtyard at the back under the guidance of the maid. Today was the 5th prince's big day, so the entire Monarch Pavilion was reserved by him. However, in order to reserve the Monarch Pavilion, the 5th prince had obviously spent a lot. Without 100 or 200,000 mid-grade spirit stones, it was absolutely impossible to reserve the entire Monarch Pavilion, and this was only the price of one night. Along the way, Xiao Chen secretly admired the environment of the Emperor Pavilion. The main hall was splendid and magnificent. After entering the backyard, there was a small bridge overflowing water. It was extremely beautiful. The Monarch Pavilion didn't blindly pursue tacky luxury. Just from these simple decorations, it wasn't difficult to see that the owner of the Monarch Pavilion really had a certain vision. It was no wonder that the Monarch Pavilion was known as the #1 restaurant in the entire Moonless Empire. Along the way, many people warmly greeted Chu Wuming. These people were also here to attend the 5th prince's wedding. They were all descendants of various noble clans. Because this wedding wasn't recognized by the imperial family, the older generation of the various noble clans weren't present. However, many of the younger generation were present. Almost all of them were from the younger generation. Not a single one of the powerful ministers of the imperial court or the patriarchs of the various noble clans were present. In the huge bamboo courtyard, there were artificial mountains and lakes surrounding it. However, at this moment, it was already filled with tables and chairs. Moreover, in the middle of the courtyard, there was a red carpet that stretched directly from the entrance to the center of the courtyard. The decorations were very good. Following beside Chu Wuming, Xiao Chen and Chu Wuming quickly arrived in front of the main table. At this moment, Chu Wushuang, Chu Wuk, and the other princes and princesses had already arrived. Seeing Chu Wuming arrive, Chu Wushuang snappily said, "Third brother is really arrogant. I thought you weren't coming." Hearing Chu Wushuang's words, Chu Wuming refused to be outdone and replied, "Second brother, you came quite early today. Why? Are you planning to pull 5th brother under your wing?" The moment the two of them met, the smell of gunpowder filled the air. The 5th prince was still in a neutral state and didn't side with any of the 3 Chu Wuming. Chu Wushuang coldly snorted and didn't say anything else. Chu Wuming and Xiao Chen also slowly sat down. The banquet hadn't started yet, but everyone was still casually chatting. Of course, under this seemingly joyous atmosphere, there were actually undercurrents surging. Chu Wuming, Chu Wushuang, and Chu Wuk sat together at the same table. Anyone could smell the hidden gunpowder in the air. Without saying too much, Xiao Chen sat beside Chu Wuming with an indifferent expression. As he sipped the wine in his cup, he sized up the people present with nothing to do. The people gathered here today were probably the most influential people of the younger generation in the entire Moonless Empire. Every single one of them had an extraordinary background. If they weren't the direct descendants of large clans, they were the heirs of the nobles of the current dynasty. They didn't have any intention of interacting with these people. While they were casually chatting and waiting, the 5th prince, who was wearing a red robe, finally appeared. With a carefree smile on his face, the fifth prince directly went to the table where Chu Wuming and the others were sitting. He cupped his hands and smiled at everyone. "Big brother, second brother, third brother, and everyone else, let's drink a few more cups today." Hearing the fifth prince's words, everyone smiled and replied. With the appearance of the fifth prince, the wedding officially began. After greeting everyone, a young girl wearing a red dress and a red cloth over her head walked into the main courtyard, accompanied by 4 maids. The young girl's appearance couldn't be seen, but she was the main character today. His gaze stopped on the bride. At this moment, Xiao Chen frowned slightly. Although he couldn't see the girl's appearance, Xiao Chen felt a sense of familiarity from her aura. He definitely knew this girl, but he couldn't remember who she was. His gaze was firmly fixed on the bride. When the bride walked into the center of the main courtyard, Xiao Chen's eyes suddenly flashed with a strange light. Only then did Xiao Chen finally recognize who this girl was. Without hesitation, Xiao Chen directly stood up and strode towards the bride. The wedding had already begun. At this moment, Xiao Chen's actions clearly attracted everyone's attention. However, because Xiao Chen was now Chu Wuming's subordinate, and his strength wasn't inferior to Yang Heng's, although everyone was puzzled by Xiao Chen's actions, they didn't reprimand him. Under everyone's gaze, Xiao Chen strode towards the bride. He didn't even look at the fifth prince at the side and directly reached out to lift the bride's red veil. Seeing Xiao Chen's actions, someone finally shouted. This person was none other than Chu Wushuang. Seeing that Xiao Chen was about to lift the bride's red veil, Chu Wushuang shouted, "Xiao Chen, how dare you?" Lifting the bride's red veil on the day of the wedding was indeed an act of great disrespect to the groom. However, Xiao Chen completely ignored Chu Wushuang's angry shout. Before anyone could react, Xiao Chen had already removed the red veil from the bride's head. A beautiful face appeared in front of everyone. Looking at the girl in front of him, Xiao Chen said with a slightly solemn expression, "It really is you. Please add me to your collection, monthly vote, recommend me." Chapter 396. Looking at the girl in front of him, Xiao Chen's expression turned ugly. Everyone around him had strange expressions on their faces. What's going on? The wedding had just begun, and the bride had just appeared, but Xiao Chen had already removed her red veil. It could be seen that the fifth prince, who was standing at the side, was completely stunned at this moment, and a surge of extreme anger continued to surge in his heart. Without caring about the expressions of the people around him, Xiao Chen looked at the bride in front of him and called out in a deep voice, "Xiao?" The girl's name was Xiao? She was a direct descendant of the Xiao family and could be considered Xiao Chen's cousin. As for Xiao, most of his impression of her was from when he was young. When he was young, she could be considered one of the people of the same generation who had a good relationship with Xiao Chen. She liked to follow behind Xiao Chen. However, after Xiao Chen left the Xiao family, the number of times they met each other had decreased. This time, because of the Xiao family, many people had obtained a quota to go to the Sky River continent. Xiao was naturally on the list. However, after arriving at the Sky River continent, she was separated. She was separated from the rest of the people and was left alone. She had been training in the Sky River continent alone. Naturally, she had suffered a lot. She had traveled around the major cities of the Moonless Empire before finally arriving at the imperial capital. However, it was only when he had just entered the imperial capital, he had coincidentally bumped into the fifth prince and was instantly attracted to him. Immediately, he was captivated by her beauty. Without any hesitation, the fifth prince ordered his men to take Xiao. She was tied up and brought to the imperial palace. As a hedonistic prince, the fifth prince had done plenty of things like abducting women. As for Xiao Luo, who had been kidnapped by the fifth prince and brought to the imperial palace, Xiao Luo, who had been abducted by the fifth prince, had been kidnapped by the fifth prince. Xiao Chen, who had been tied up by the fifth prince, resisted with all her might. However, with her little cultivation, she was naturally unable to do anything. The fifth prince had already locked her up in his residence for half a month. During this time, the fifth prince could be said to be worse than a beast. For a little girl to fall into such a situation, the result was obvious. Needless to say, she had indeed been defiled by the fifth prince. He had forcefully taken Xiao. The fifth prince did not intend to let go of her body. He even wanted to marry Xiao. That was how today's scene came to be. Regarding the marriage that the fifth prince had mentioned, Xiao had no idea what to do. He also knew that this was just a farce, because the imperial family did not acknowledge him, and the fifth prince would not give him any status. He had never imagined that he would encounter such a thing as soon as he arrived at the Tianhe continent. He even had the thought of dying. However, in the hands of the fifth prince, even death had become an extravagant hope. According to the fifth prince, how could he bear to let Xiao have such a beauty? He died just like that. He was in complete despair. However, just as his heart was about to turn to ash, Xiao Chen appeared. Looking at Xiao Chen in front of him, he was stunned. He stood rooted to the ground in a daze. After a long while, Xiao Luo's expression changed. She suddenly rushed into Xiao Chen's arms, and the tears that she had been holding back for a long time finally burst out at this moment. She hugged Xiao Chen tightly, as if Xiao Chen would disappear if she let go. She choked with sobs as she shouted, "Brother Chen!" She cried very sadly and gently patted Xiao. Xiao Chen also did not expect to meet Xiao here. Although she didn't say anything, Xiao Chen could already guess that she must have suffered a lot these days. All right, don't cry. Big brother is here." Yi Zichen gently patted Xiao. Xiao Chen said softly as he patted the thin back of Xiao. When he saw Xiao Chen and Xiao, the two of them were hugging each other, the fifth prince could no longer bear it. He didn't know that Xiao Chen and Xiao were siblings. They were brother and sister. There were so many people present, and it was his wedding, but his bride was hugging another man. How could the fifth prince tolerate this? The aura of a great success, celestial realm expert soared up to the sky from his body. He looked at Xiao Chen with fury in his eyes and shouted coldly, "Xiao Chen, let go of her." The fifth prince's shout brought everyone back to their senses. They looked at each other in dismay. No one had expected such a thing to happen. Wasn't Xiao Chen too bold? He actually hugged the bride in front of everyone. Where would the fifth prince put his face? Unlike the others, Chu Wuming and the other two all looked at Xiao Chen. Chu Wuk and Chu Wushuang both smiled coldly. They didn't care if the fifth prince lost face today. They only cared that Xiao Chen was courting death. Moreover, they were also considering whether they could make use of this opportunity to do something to Chu Wuming. Unlike the other two, Chu Wuming was frowning. He didn't expect Xiao Chen to do such a thing. What was going on? Snatching someone else's bride in front of everyone? Wasn't he offending the fifth prince completely? Xiao Chen didn't care about everyone's gazes. Hearing the fifth prince's angry shout, he continued to comfort Xiao, who was in his arms. He didn't have the slightest intention of paying attention to Xiao. Seeing that Xiao Chen ignored him, the fifth prince was even angrier. Without hesitation, he threw a punch. Because he was blinded by anger, the fifth prince actually dared to attack Xiao Chen. Facing the fifth prince's attack, Xiao Chen casually pointed his finger and used the Chun Jun sword finger. In an instant, the Chun Jun sword finger shattered the fifth prince's fist radiance and penetrated his right shoulder, leaving a bloody hole. Xiao Chen injured the fifth prince with a single finger. After breaking through to the Dao Querying Realm, Xiao Chen's combat strength had far surpassed before. How could the fifth prince be a match for him? From the beginning to the end, he didn't even look at the fifth prince. Under Xiao Chen's gentle comfort, Xiao stopped crying. She gradually stopped crying, but her big eyes were still red. She raised her head and looked at Xiao Chen. "Xiao?" she said with an aggrieved expression. Brother, she wanted to tell Xiao Chen about her experience, but when the words came to her mouth, she found it hard to speak. After all, a woman had been defiled. This kind of thing, if it was anyone else, they wouldn't be able to say it. I don't know who Xiao is. She had already been forcefully defiled by the fifth prince. Xiao Chen said softly when she saw that he was stuttering for a long time without saying a complete sentence. Don't worry, I'm here. If you don't want to get married today, then don't. With me here, no one can force you. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Xiao Chen's expression changed drastically. Her tears, which had stopped flowing, flowed down again. She bit her lips and nodded at Xiao Chen. Just as Xiao Chen finished speaking, the fifth prince, who had been injured earlier, held his shoulder and struggled to stand up. The fury in his eyes had already turned into killing intent. He glared at Xiao Chen and shouted angrily. Men, kill him for me. I'm going to kill him today. Men. Following the fifth prince's furious roar, a group of close to 100 imperial guards charged into the courtyard. They all looked at Xiao Chen as if they were facing a great enemy. The weapons in their hands were also pointed at Xiao Chen. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 397. Xiao Chen's expression did not change in the slightest in the face of nearly 100 imperial guards. Xiao Chen pulled them behind him and said with a calm expression, If I leave first, who here can stop me? His tone was very calm, but it was filled with confidence. It could even be said to be a little arrogant. Hearing this, the fifth prince, who had already arrived in front of Xiao Chen, shouted coldly. Xiao Chen, don't be so arrogant. I know you are strong, but how many imperial guards can you stop? 100, 1,000, or 10,000? If you don't give me an explanation today, don't even think about walking out of this door. Xiao Chen's actions today had completely humiliated the fifth prince. Thus, even if he knew that Xiao Chen was Chu Wuming's man, the fifth prince did not care. He shouted angrily. However, just as the fifth prince finished speaking, before Xiao Chen could say anything, Chu Wuming had already walked over with large strides. He stood beside Xiao Chen and said in a low voice, Fifth brother, there must be some misunderstanding. Chu Wuming was clearly unable to sit by and do nothing now that the matter had escalated to such a state. However, after hearing Chu Wuming's words, the fifth prince was clearly unable to care too much at this moment. Even though he knew that Chu Wuming's influence was much greater than his, the fifth prince did not have any intention of backing down. He looked at Chu Wuming and said with a cold expression, Third brother, you don't need to say any more. If Xiao Chen does not give me an explanation today, I will definitely not let him walk out of this door. As he spoke, the fifth prince took out a sound transmission talisman. Clearly, he wanted to call for more imperial guards. As a prince, Chu Mu treated them fairly. He gave each of them 1,000 imperial guards. These people would only listen to the orders of the princes. Seeing that the fifth prince wanted to call for more imperial guards, Chu Wuming's expression darkened slightly. However, when he thought that this matter was Xiao Chen's fault, Chu Wuming still looked at Xiao Chen. Clearly, he wanted Xiao Chen to explain. Of course, Chu Wuming thought this way because he did not know the relationship between Xiao Chen and Xiao Chen. If he knew the relationship between the two, Chu Wuming would probably not think this way. Faced with Chu Wuming's gaze, Xiao Chen's expression was calm. However, a cold light flashed in his eyes. Xiao Chen looked around the crowd and said indifferently, Everyone wants an explanation, right? All right, I will give everyone an explanation. As he spoke, Xiao Chen pointed at Xiao Chen behind him. He said calmly, This woman's name is Xiao? She is my younger sister, a sister of the same bloodline. Originally, Xiao Chen and I were together. When we first entered the Moonless Empire, we got separated due to some matters. During this period of time, I have been searching for Xiao Chen. However, there has been no news of her. And now I have met Xiao Chen here. Everyone, what should I do? After hearing Xiao Chen's words, everyone finally understood what was going on. Xiao Chen? Xiao Chen was Xiao Chen's sister. In this way, Xiao Chen's actions could be understood. Xiao Chen took in the changes in everyone's expressions. At the same time, he looked at the fifth prince and shouted in a slightly louder voice. Speaking of which, I would like to ask your highness the fifth prince, is my sister sincere in marrying you? Or are you forcing her to marry you? Who is the one giving an explanation today? Xiao Chen's words stunned the fifth prince at first. Then, he looked away, not daring to meet Xiao Chen's eyes. Of course, the fifth prince knew in his heart that during this period of time, he had treated Xiao Chen badly. Facing the fifth prince's evasive gaze, Xiao Chen smiled coldly. However, at this moment, Chu Wushuang suddenly came to the fifth prince's side and patted the fifth prince's shoulder lightly. Then, he looked coldly at Xiao Chen and said, "You can't say that. Let's not talk about Xiao Chen. Regardless of whether she is your sister or not, today is my fifth brother's big day. If you do this, where will my fifth brother's face go? And now, you want my fifth brother to give you an explanation? Xiao Chen, even if you are Chu Wuming's person, you can't be so overbearing, right?" After speaking, without waiting for Xiao Chen's reply, Chu Wushuang turned to look at the fifth prince and said with a smile, "Fifth brother, don't worry. Today, second brother will be your strong backing. No matter who tries to stop you, second brother will help you block them. You just need to ask for an explanation." Chu Wushuang stood up at this moment. His goal was naturally not to seek justice for the fifth prince. Instead, he wanted to use this opportunity to deal with Xiao Chen and Chu Wuming. However, the fifth prince did not realize this. When he heard Chu Wushuang's words, the fifth prince's face was filled with gratitude. Then, he looked arrogantly at Xiao Chen and said, "Originally, Chu Wuming's appearance made the fifth prince feel a little guilty. In addition, Xiao Chen's words perfectly explained his previous actions. Originally, the fifth prince wanted to retreat. However, now that Chu Wushuang stood up, it undoubtedly gave the fifth prince a lot of confidence. After all, Chu Wushuang's influence was not weaker than Chu Wuming's. In fact, it was even stronger. With a backer, the fifth prince naturally felt a lot more confident. He looked at Xiao Chen and shouted coldly, "Nonsense. This woman is a slave that I bought from a human trafficker. How did she become your sister? Xiao Chen, if you want to deceive people, don't you think that your words are too childish? Today, you must give this prince an explanation. Otherwise, this prince will not let you walk out of this door." He was completely shameless. He was lying through his teeth. And just as the fifth prince finished speaking, hundreds of imperial guards swarmed in from outside the courtyard. These people were the fifth prince's personal guards. Seeing that his army had arrived and with the second prince's support, the fifth prince became even more fearless. At the same time, when he saw the fifth prince's huge lineup and the sneering Chu Wushuang standing beside him, the expression in Chu Wuming's eyes became somewhat complicated. Seeing that the fifth prince had become full of confidence again, and sensing the change in Chu Wuming, Xiao Chen smiled faintly. "Your Highness, there is no need for you to interfere in this matter. This is a matter that I caused, and I can deal with it myself. There is no need for your Highness to worry." He had already guessed that Chu Wuming was weighing the pros and cons. As for what he was weighing, it was obvious. Facing Chu Wushuang and the fifth prince at the same time, Chu Wuming was considering whether to continue supporting Xiao Chen. After all, this was clearly a trap set by Chu Wushuang. If Chu Wuming insisted on protecting Xiao Chen, he would probably have to pay a heavy price. At the crucial moment, Chu Wuming cowered. Xiao Chen did not have any other thoughts about this. This was how people from royal clans were. Their first consideration would always be their own interests. As soon as he finished speaking, without waiting for Chu Wuming to reply, Xiao Chen glanced at the slightly frightened Xiao Chen behind him and smiled. "Later, follow behind me. Don't worry, with your brother here, no one will be able to hurt you." After he finished speaking, the storage ring on his hand flashed and the crimson-edged sword immediately appeared in his hand. With the sword in hand, Xiao Chen's aura instantly became fierce. He said to the fifth prince indifferently, "This sword is my, Xiao Chen's, explanation to you." Chapter 398. With the sword in his hand, Xiao Chen's aura changed as well. It was as if a treasured sword had been unsheathed. It was unstoppable. The fifth prince was talking about Xiao Chen? He was a slave that he had bought. Xiao Chen did not even have the thought of arguing with him. It was a waste of breath to reason with a scoundrel. Since the fifth prince wanted an explanation, he would use the 7 feet green sword in his hand to give him an explanation. The terrifying sword intent wreaked havoc, protecting Xiao Chen and Xiao Chen. The two of them were firmly protected. As for Chu Wuming, Xiao Chen did not count him in. In fact, when Chu Wuming was hesitating just now, there was already a gap between the two of them. Pulling Xiao Chen along? He slowly walked forward. With every step that Xiao Chen took, the Imperial Guards involuntarily took a step back. Looking at Xiao Chen's back, Chu Wuming's eyes revealed a trace of struggle. He knew that if he chose to retreat today, there would definitely be a gap between him and Xiao Chen. This gap could not be mended. In fact, Xiao Chen might even leave his camp. He wanted to protect Xiao Chen. Even if he had to face Chu Wushuang, he would not hesitate. However, Chu Wuming was also very clear that once he stepped forward, he would fall into Chu Wushuang's trap. Chu Wushuang wanted to use Xiao Chen to drag him down. Moreover, there was still Chu Wuk at the side. Although Chu Wuk did not step forward, once he was dragged down by Chu Wushuang, how could Chu Wuk give up on this opportunity to beat a drowning dog? Obviously, he would not. It was because there was Chu Wushuang in the open and Chu Wuk in the dark that Chu Wuming was in a dilemma. Until now, Chu Wuming did not say a word. Seeing that Chu Wuming had chosen to retreat, Chu Wushuang curled his lips and smiled noncommittally. Then, he looked at Xiao Chen. Since Chu Wuming didn't fall for his trap, he might as well take this opportunity to kill Xiao Chen. A cold glint flashed in Chu Wuk's eyes, and he immediately shouted coldly, "Xiao Chen, you really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Putting aside the fact that you ruined fifth brother's wedding, now you want to publicly murder a prince?" The moment he opened his mouth, he pinned a huge accusation on Xiao Chen's head. Murdering a prince was not a small crime. The royal family would definitely fly into a rage. Hearing Chu Wuk's words, Xiao Chen smiled coldly without commenting. He ignored Chu Wuk and continued walking forward. Hundreds of Imperial Guards were forced back by Xiao Chen's sword. Seeing this, the murderous intent in Chu Wushuang's eyes intensified. He gritted his teeth and shouted angrily, "Xiao Chen is implying that he wants to murder a prince. Take him down. If he resists, kill him without mercy." Chu Wushuang shouted. Hearing this, the hundreds of Imperial Guards did not obey. They were the fifth prince's personal guards, so they naturally wouldn't listen to Chu Wushuang. Therefore, many people looked at the fifth prince, waiting for his orders. Faced with the gazes of the many personal guards, the fifth prince made up his mind and said, "What are you waiting for? Take this person down. If he resists, kill him without mercy." In the end, the fifth prince still chose to stand on Chu Wushuang's side. There was no other way. At this point, it could be said that he had already formed a grudge with Xiao Chen. Moreover, Xiao Chen was Chu Wuming's subordinate. Facing Chu Wuming alone, the fifth prince was obviously not a match for him. Even though they were all princes, among the 9 princes, only Chu Wuming and the other 2 had real power. Therefore, for his own sake, the fifth prince could only choose one backer, and this backer was undoubtedly Chu Wushuang. With the fifth prince's order, the hundreds of Imperial Guards gritted their teeth and shouted angrily. They charged towards Xiao Chen. Seeing the hundreds of Imperial Guards charging toward Xiao Chen, who was following closely behind Xiao Chen, was shocked. Her expression changed drastically, but before she could say anything, Xiao Chen was already engaged in a fierce battle with the first group of Imperial Guards who rushed up first. When the battle broke out, no one thought that things would develop to this point. However, no one present was a fool. In the face of such a muddy water, no one would be foolish enough to get involved. Everyone retreated far away to the edge of the courtyard and coldly watched the development of the situation. Chu Wuming, who had retreated a distance away like everyone else, looked at Xiao Chen, who was wielding the scarlet-edged sword. His eyes were filled with hesitation. He wanted to make a move, but he did not dare to. The price was too high, so high that even Chu Wuming could not bear it. Xiao Chen did not seem to care about the expressions of the people around him. Holding the crimson-edged sword, he faced the first Imperial Guard who had rushed up to him. Without hesitation, he raised his sword and swept it across. The crowd only saw a flash of sword light, and then the head of the Imperial Guard flew into the air. He killed one person with a single strike. He did not care about the status of these Imperial Guards, nor did he care about the consequences of killing them. In Xiao Chen's view, since these people had attacked him, there was no need to show them any mercy. Blood splattered everywhere as the headless corpse fell backward. Following the death of the first Imperial Guard, a massacre that shocked everyone had officially begun. Most of the Imperial Guards were only at the Celestial Realm, so they were no match for Xiao Chen at all. He held Xiao Chen's hand with one hand. With one hand holding the scarlet-edged sword tightly, Xiao Chen slowly walked forward, reaping the lives of the Imperial Guards. How could he dare to massacre the Imperial Guards like this? Seeing the Imperial Guards dying one by one under Xiao Chen's sword, a disciple of a big family in the distance said with a pale face, "In the Moonless Empire, regardless of whether you were guilty or not, massacring the Imperial Guards was already a capital offense. It should be known that the Imperial Guards represented the Imperial family. They were the Imperial family's private army, and their job was to protect the safety of the Imperial family. Massacring the Imperial Guards was the same as looking down on the Imperial family. Such an outcome would definitely incur the wrath of the Imperial family. Damn it, how dare he do this?" Like the others, seeing Xiao Chen continuously reaping the lives of the Imperial Guards, the fifth prince was completely stunned. Obviously, the fifth prince did not know that Xiao Chen was a person who did not care about anything. Xiao Chen did not care whether you were from the Imperial family or not. If you did not cross his bottom line, there was still room for negotiation. Xiao Chen might still hold back a little. However, today, Xiao Chen had to bring Xiao Chen along with him. So, even if they were the Imperial Guards, so what? If they dared to stop him, he would still kill them with a single strike. The number of Imperial Guards who died under Xiao Chen's sword grew more and more. Soon, there were dozens of them. The ground was filled with corpses and blood. Once again, Xiao Chen beheaded another Imperial Guard. At this point, the hundreds of Imperial Guards were somewhat terrified. Although they firmly surrounded Xiao Chen, no one dared to step forward. Lightly flicking the blood on his sword, Xiao Chen glanced at the Imperial Guards in front of him and said expressionlessly, "If anyone dares to stop me tonight, no matter who it is, I will kill them with a single strike." When these words came out, the surrounding people were completely stunned. Xiao Chen's words were simply too arrogant. According to his words, not to mention these Imperial Guards, even if the fifth prince personally tried to stop him, Xiao Chen would still dare to kill him with a single strike. Chapter 399. One man and one sword. Xiao Chen killed hundreds of Imperial Guards until they were terrified. No one dared to step forward. With every step Xiao Chen took, the Imperial Guards would take a step back. Seeing that the Imperial Guards were terrified, the fifth prince's face was full of shock. He unconsciously looked at Chu Wushuang. Now that he was on the same side as Chu Wushuang, he naturally had to follow Chu Wushuang's lead. Facing the fifth prince's gaze, Chu Wushuang's expression became more serious. He couldn't help but turn to look at Yang Heng. With Xiao Chen's strength, Yang Heng would have to take action. However, facing Chu Wushuang's gaze, Yang Heng understood what he meant. Before he could speak, Yang Heng directly refused. I won't take advantage of others. Chu Wushuang wanted Yang Heng to cooperate with the Imperial Guards to kill Xiao Chen. However, Yang Heng directly refused. As a core disciple of Tianfeng Shengzong, Yang Heng naturally had his own pride. He wouldn't take advantage of others. Although he had been defeated by Xiao Chen, Yang Heng still had no intention of taking advantage of others. Seeing Yang Heng's decisive refusal, Chu Wushuang's face became even more gloomy. However, he didn't say anything. Since Yang Heng was unwilling, he couldn't force him. After all, Yang Heng's status was there. He didn't say anything else. However, since Yang Heng refused to take action, Chu Wushuang had other methods. Looking at the Imperial Guards surrounding Xiao Chen, Chu Wushuang shouted, "Whoever kills Xiao Chen tonight will be promoted by 3 ranks and rewarded with 10,000 mid-grade spirit stones." These Imperial Guards were already scared of Xiao Chen. However, when they heard Chu Wushuang's words, a hint of excitement appeared in their eyes. The reward of 10,000 mid-grade spirit stones was definitely a huge sum of money. Moreover, in addition to the spirit stones, they would also be promoted by 3 rank. This made it even harder for them to refuse. As the saying goes, when there is a great reward, there will be brave men. Following Chu Wushuang's words, many of the timid Imperial Guards decided to go all out. After all, as long as he could kill Xiao Chen, it would mean that he had reached the heavens in a single bound and stood out among his peers. "Brother, this kid is alone. Let's attack together and hack him to death." No one knew who shouted. Hearing that, the Imperial Guards all shouted in unison. Immediately after, the numerous Imperial Guards who were originally retreating in defeat once again madly rushed towards Xiao Chen. Their imposing manner was much more ferocious than before. Many of the Imperial Guards were tempted by Chu Wushuang's generous rewards. Faced with another attack from the Imperial Guards, the murderous intent in Xiao Chen's eyes grew even stronger. He still held Xiao Chen with one hand. Xiao Chen shouted coldly as he slashed out with the scarlet-edged sword in one hand. Triple-layered waves, 100-layered waves. He directly used the triple-layered wave. With one slash, surging spiritual energy rushed towards the Imperial Guards in front of him like turbulent waves. The powerful sword essence coupled with the might of the triple-layered waves killed many of the Imperial Guards in a single slash. Xiao Chen did not linger after gaining the upper hand. Instead, he dragged Xiao Chen along. He immediately rushed into the crowd like a tiger entering a flock of sheep. The long swords in their hands were swung continuously. Every swing of the sword meant that someone was about to die. Their formation had already been disrupted by the 3 layers of overlapping waves earlier. Now, facing Xiao Chen who was charging at them, these Imperial Guards had no way of resisting. There was no need to hold back. He had already said before that whoever dared to stop him today would die. It was as if he had transformed into a god of death. This time, the massacre was even more bloody than before. In the blink of an eye, more than 10 Imperial Guards had died under Xiao Chen's sword. Without giving these Imperial Guards any chance, Xiao Chen rushed out of the courtyard. Soon, Xiao Chen rushed out of the courtyard under the encirclement of the Imperial Guards and rushed out of the Monarch Pavilion. Seeing Xiao Chen single-handedly defeating hundreds of Imperial Guards, the people in the courtyard were all shocked. Someone could not help but ask, "Is he really going to kill his way out of the Monarch Pavilion?" Xiao Chen's actions caused these young masters to feel a chill in their hearts. Such a large-scale massacre of the Imperial Guards had never happened before. Today, Xiao Chen's actions showed that he did not put the Imperial family in his eyes. Everyone was shocked. However, Chu Wushuang's eyes were filled with killing intent. He could see that even though the Imperial Guards had the advantage in numbers, they were unable to do anything to Xiao Chen. He thought to himself, "Tonight, no matter what price I have to pay, I will kill you in the monarch pavilion. Knowing that today was the best opportunity to kill Shao Chen, Chu Wushuang immediately took out a sound transmission talisman and contacted his subordinate, the Huban camp, after realizing that the 5th Prince's Imperial Guards were unable to do anything to Shao Chen. Previously, it was said that although Chu Mu had 9 sons, only Chu Wushuang and the other 2 held real power. The most important reason was that the 3 of them held military power. Chu Wu's venomous python camp, Chu Wushuang's Huban camp, and Chu Wuming's battle dragon camp were all powerful armies of the Moonless Empire. Although there were not many of them, their combat power was far from what the Imperial Guards could compare to. Every one of them had substantial military power in their hands. Chu Wushuang had contacted the Huban camp at this time, which had fully expressed his attitude. No matter what, he must kill Shao Chen tonight. When Chu Wushuang used the sound transmission talisman, Chu Wuming, who was not far away, naturally saw everything. At this moment, Chu Wushuang could only mobilize the Huban camp. His expression became more and more complicated. The Huban camp had a total of 2,000 people. However, the lowest cultivation level of the soldiers was at the Dao Querying Realm. Moreover, they had mastered a set of battle formations. Their strength was not inferior to an ordinary army of 100,000 people. He did not expect Chu Wushuang to mobilize the Huban camp. Chu Wuming was very clear that once Shao Chen was surrounded by the Huban camp, the situation would not be as simple as facing the Imperial Guards. This was because the Huban camp was a true army of tigers and wolves. It was a terrifying existence that had experienced the baptism of countless battles at the border. Chu Wuming did not doubt that if there were no changes tonight, as long as Chu Wushuang's Huban camp arrived, Shao Chen would definitely die. Do I have to watch Shao Chen die here? Chu Wuming was extremely conflicted. He slowly closed his eyes as if he was making an important decision. After a long while, Chu Wuming's eyes suddenly opened. Then, he used the same sound transmission talisman without hesitation. After struggling for so long, Chu Wuming finally could not watch Shao Chen die. Even though he knew that if he helped, he would be falling into Chu Wushuang's trap. However, even so, Chu Wuming could not care so much. First, he had to save Shao Chen's life. Other things could be dealt with later. Chapter 400. In the end, Chu Wuming finally made a decision. As a prince and a strong competitor for the position of crown prince, Chu Wuming felt that making such a decision was probably the stupidest decision he had ever made. He was very clear about the consequences of interfering in this matter. However, Chu Wuming really couldn't watch Shao Chen die without doing anything. As a prince, Chu Wuming had the side of a royal family that chased after fame and fortune. However, he was also full of pride. After being together with Shao Chen for so long, it would be a lie to say that the two of them didn't have any feelings for each other. Moreover, there was no doubt that Shao Chen had helped him. If it wasn't for Shao Chen, Chu Wuming would have been eliminated long ago. Now that Shao Chen was in trouble, regardless of the final outcome, Chu Wuming wanted to stand on the same side as Shao Chen. Like Chu Wushuang, Chu Wuming also used a voice transmission talisman to contact his battle dragon camp. When Chu Wuming used the voice transmission talisman, he didn't know that Chu Wuk, who had been hiding in the dark, had seen everything. Chu Wuk murmured softly with a faint smile on his face. "Third brother, I knew you would definitely interfere." He had already expected that with Chu Wuming's character, he wouldn't leave Chu Wuming in the lurch. With a faint smile, Chu Wuk also contacted his venomous python camp. Now that Chu Wuming had already made a move, Chu Wushuang's Huban camp was obviously not enough. Therefore, Chu Wuk naturally had to help. Even if he couldn't directly kill Chu Wuming this time, he had to cut off one of his arms. The 3 major camps under the 3 princes moved out together. There were 3 camps in the imperial capital's triangle. These 3 camps were the venomous python camp, Huban camp, and battle dragon camp. At this time, after receiving Chu Wuming and the other two's messages, the soldiers of the 3 battalions also moved out and went straight to the monarch pavilion. No one knew that the 3 princes had mobilized the Viper Battalion, the Tiger Battalion, and the War Dragon Battalion. At this moment, Xiao Chen's battle had already been fought outside the courtyard. Many people followed from afar and witnessed the entire battle with their own eyes. Facing hundreds of imperial guards, Xiao Chen became braver as he fought. His white clothes were already dyed red with blood. However, it was also because of this that Xiao Chen became even more murderous. His attacks were decisive and ruthless. After a fierce battle, the 5th Prince's hundreds of imperial guards were reduced to just over 200 men. Looking at Xiao Chen, who was in the middle of a fierce battle, someone said, "This Xiao Chen is really extraordinary." As expected of the person that His Highness the 3rd Prince relies on the most. So what if he's extraordinary? In my opinion, Xiao Chen is in danger today. Oh, what do you mean, Brother Chen? The way I see it, Xiao Chen is about to break out of the encirclement. He. His Highness the 5th Prince is naturally incapable of taking down Xiao Chen by himself. However, do you think that the 1st Prince and the 2nd Prince will just stand by and watch? Xiao Chen is one of the 3rd Prince's generals. With such a good opportunity in front of them, do you think that the 1st Prince and the 2nd Prince will let Xiao Chen escape from danger? The way I see it, Xiao Chen will undoubtedly die tonight because the 2 princes will not give him the slightest chance of survival. Naturally, the 5th Prince was not strong enough to deal with Xiao Chen. However, the 1st Prince and the 2nd Prince were different. After listening to the young man's analysis, everyone understood that Xiao Chen was indeed in danger tonight. This danger did not come from the 5th Prince. Rather, it came from the 1st Prince and the 2nd Prince. As they watched the development of the battle, they discussed in low voices. While they were talking, the 5th Prince's imperial guards were almost completely slaughtered by Xiao Chen. He killed hundreds of imperial guards alone with his sword. From the beginning of the battle until now, the people from the Monarch Pavilion did not intervene. Thinking about it, the people from the Monarch Pavilion were not fools. They knew that today's matter involved the royal family and even the battle for the position of Crown Prince. Although the Monarch Pavilion was the largest restaurant in the Moonless Empire and had considerable influence, it was obviously not enough compared to the royal family. Therefore, the smartest thing to do was to pretend that they did not see anything and let them do whatever they wanted. After all, the royal family would definitely intervene in the end. In just half an hour, the hundreds of imperial guards of the 5th Prince were slaughtered. However, Xiao Chen was also cut a few times, but it was not serious. It was just a superficial wound. He did not care about his injuries. However, when she saw the wounds on Xiao Chen's body, she became anxious. She looked at Xiao Chen with her big watery eyes and said with a worried face, "Brother, your wounds." From the beginning to the end, Xiao Chen was not worried at all. She was protected by Xiao Chen, so she was not hurt at all. Now that she heard Xiao Chen's name, Xiao Chen smiled at her and said, "Brother, I'm fine. Let's go. Let's go back." The 5th Prince's imperial guards were all slaughtered. Now there was no one blocking their way. Xiao Chen killed all the way and arrived at the gate of the Monarch Pavilion. Seeing that Xiao Chen was about to leave, Chu Wushuang, who had chased after him from the courtyard, became serious. He could not let Xiao Chen go now. His Huban battalion had not arrived yet. He had to find a way to delay him. Originally, it was best to let Yang Heng take action. With Yang Heng's strength, it was not difficult for him to delay Xiao Chen for a while. However, Chu Wushuang knew that Yang Heng would not agree at this time. Without any other choice, Chu Wushuang looked at the 5th Prince and said, "5th brother, find a way to delay Xiao Chen. You can't let him leave like this. My Huban camp will arrive soon. When the time comes, we will kill him in one fell swoop." Hearing Chu Wushuang's words, the 5th Prince's face changed. However, after hearing that Chu Wuhuang had mobilized the Huban camp, the fifth prince quickly calmed down. He looked at Xiao Chen. After a while, the fifth prince gritted his teeth and stepped forward. Xiao Chen, what's wrong? Do you want to leave like this? His imperial guards had been slaughtered by Xiao Chen, but the fifth prince still dared to come out and berate him. Hearing the fifth prince's words, Xiao Chen stared at him coldly. Seeing this, the fifth prince forced himself to calm down and said, Xiao Chen, this Xiao Chen? Is she your sister? I might as well tell you a secret. Your sister is really beautiful. Until now, I still can't forget the taste of her. TSK. That feeling was really good. Chu Wuhuang asked him to stop Xiao Chen. After thinking about it, the fifth prince finally decided to use reverse psychology. Xiao Chen should not know that he had sullied Xiao Chen. Therefore, the fifth prince took the initiative to reveal this matter. In this way, with Xiao Chen's character, he would definitely not leave. Instead, he would come to kill him. It had to be said that the fifth prince was indeed a very scheming person. By saying this, not only could he delay Xiao Chen, but he could also confirm the fact that Xiao Chen intended to murder the fifth prince. In this way, Chu Wuhuang could act even more unscrupulously. It could be said to be killing two birds with one stone. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 401. Now that things had developed to this stage, the fifth prince clearly had no way out. Furthermore, he was going to force himself on Xiao? The fifth prince knew that he would not be able to hide the matter for long. Although Xiao Zhongkong had just said that Xiao Zhongkong was not the only one. Although Xiao did not say anything, once Xiao Chen brought her back, Xiao would definitely tell him. Sooner or later, she would tell Xiao Chen about this matter. Because of this, instead of letting Xiao Chen seek revenge on him in the future, it was better to directly eliminate Xiao Chen here and now to prevent future troubles. He knew very well how Xiao Chen would react to his words, and this was the effect that the fifth prince wanted. As long as Xiao Chen showed killing intent towards him and really wanted to kill him, then Chu Wuhuang would have a legitimate reason to make a move. One must know that just based on Xiao Chen causing trouble at the wedding and killing the imperial guards, it was probably not enough to anger the imperial family. After all, one should not forget that Xiao Chen's uncle was the retired emperor of the Moonless Empire. For these matters, the imperial family might not take it too seriously for the sake of the Burning Sky ruler. However, once Xiao Chen's intention to kill the fifth prince was confirmed, it would be a completely different matter. At that time, the imperial family would definitely not let this matter rest. It was with this thought that the fifth prince made such a risky move. Hearing his words, Xiao Chen turned his head and looked at Xiao behind him. Sensing Xiao Chen's gaze, Xiao looked back at him. At this moment, Xiao was already crying uncontrollably. Facing Xiao, Xiao Chen knew that the fifth prince was telling the truth. How could he not know that the fifth prince was telling the truth? During the period of time that he was imprisoned, he had really tainted Xiao. A surge of murderous intent emanated from Xiao Chen's body. Just as the fifth prince had expected, Xiao Chen had no intention of leaving after learning of this matter. Previously, he had only wanted to capture Xiao Chen. Previously, Xiao Chen wanted to leave safely, but now, he was thinking about how to kill the fifth prince. Facing such a strong killing intent, even though the fifth prince was already prepared, he still could not help but feel a chill run down his spine. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. Facing Xiao Chen at this moment, even Xiao Chen? Both of them felt a sense of fear. Both of their hands tightly tugged at the corners of Xiao Chen's clothes. "Brother," she called out softly. He did not pay any attention to Xiao. Xiao Chen's gaze was fixed on the fifth prince. Although the fifth prince's provocation wasn't a brilliant method, anyone with a brain could see that the fifth prince was deliberately provoking Xiao Chen. Usually, Xiao Chen would never be fooled. However, he was too lazy to think about it right now. Did the fifth prince sully Xiao Chen? This was the truth, and it was enough. No matter what the fifth prince's plan was or what his goal was, Xiao Chen would kill him today. In life, there were times when people could scheme against each other and endure for the sake of their ultimate goal. However, when one's bottom line was touched, there was no need to continue to endure. If one had to constantly endure for the sake of the big picture, wouldn't one's life be very sullen? In terms of scheming against each other, Xiao Chen was not inferior to anyone. However, when one's bottom line was touched, Xiao Chen was definitely a person who did not hold back. He knew that killing the fifth prince would cause a lot of trouble, but so what? He must kill the fifth prince today. Sensing that Xiao Chen's killing intent was getting stronger and stronger, Chu Wuming's expression changed drastically. He knew very well what the fifth prince's goal was. If Xiao Chen really attacked, it would be beyond redemption. Without hesitation, Chu Wuming immediately strode forward and arrived in front of Xiao Chen. Looking at Xiao Chen's face filled with killing intent, Chu Wuming said, "Brother Xiao, calm down. This is a provocation, a provocation. The fifth prince wants to lure you into attacking him. You can't be fooled." Chu Wuming knew very well what the fifth prince's goal was, and Xiao Chen knew it as well. However, so what? Even if it was a trap, Xiao Chen would kill this person with a single stroke of his sword today. Ignoring Chu Wuming's obstruction, Xiao Chen moved and went straight for the fifth prince. The fifth prince did not expect Xiao Chen to charge at him without hesitation. His expression changed immediately. However, at this moment, Chu Wushuang threw out a talisman. In an instant, the talisman turned into a light shield that firmly protected the fifth prince. Chu Wushuang was very satisfied with the fifth prince. Now that Xiao Chen had attacked, the fact that he intended to kill the fifth prince was confirmed. Therefore, Chu Wushuang naturally had to protect the fifth prince. This talisman was a top heaven-level defensive talisman. With its protection, the fifth prince would be safe and sound. The fifth prince was initially horrified, but after seeing Chu Wushuang taking out the talisman to protect himself, he quickly calmed down. Facing Xiao Chen's attack, the fifth prince revealed a sneer. As expected, Xiao Chen had attacked. This way, he would definitely die. It could be said that he hated the fifth prince to the core. Xiao Chen had been defiled by this bastard. It was imaginable how murderous he was. He thrust his sword forward, but due to the talisman's protection, the sword didn't hurt the fifth prince at all. While Xiao Chen was attacking crazily, a series of orderly and loud footsteps sounded from outside the emperor's pavilion. Upon hearing the footsteps, Chu Wushuang's eyes glinted with joy. The Huban camp had arrived. As expected, 2,000 soldiers clad in black armor appeared outside the emperor's pavilion. Everyone's expression changed at the sight of the 2,000 soldiers. Huban camp. It's the second prince's Huban camp. As expected, the Huban camp's appearance was enough to explain everything. It seemed that Chu Wushuang was determined to kill Xiao Chen tonight. As soon as the Huban camp appeared, Chu Wushuang bellowed without hesitation. "Huban camp, listen up. Xiao Chen attempted to murder the second prince. Kill him on the spot. Kill him." Without any hesitation, Chu Wushuang gave the order to kill. Upon hearing his command, the 2,000 soldiers of the Huban camp immediately charged at Xiao Chen. Unlike the Imperial Guards, the Huban camp was a true warrior who had been on the battlefield and didn't know what cowardice was. Therefore, even though Xiao Chen's strength was terrifying, the soldiers of the Huban camp weren't afraid of death. They immediately clashed with Xiao Chen. "Chu Wushuang, don't go overboard." Seeing that the Huban camp had made their move, Chu Wuming stood out and shouted at Chu Wushuang. Upon hearing Chu Wuming's words, Chu Wushuang didn't comment on it. "Overboard? I'm going to kill Xiao Chen tonight. What can you do about it?" It could be said that they had shed all pretense of cordiality. As soon as Chu Wuming's bellow sounded, 2,000 soldiers clad in silver armor from the battling dragon camp finally arrived. Upon seeing the arrival of the battling dragon camp, Chu Wushuang's expression changed slightly. On the other hand, Chu Wuming bellowed. Battling Dragon Camp, listen up. Protect Shao Chen. The Huban camp wanted to kill Shao Chen, while the Battling Dragon camp wanted to protect Shao Chen. However, along with Chu Wuming's command, another 2,000 soldiers clad in dark green armor appeared before the Battling Dragon camp. These 2,000 soldiers were Chu Wuck's venomous python camp. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 402. Chu Wuming, Chu Wuck, and Chu Wushuang. The 3 battalions under the 3 princes had gathered outside the monarch pavilion. Seeing the appearance of the venomous python battalion, everyone present had a solemn expression. At the same time, Chu Wuck, who hadn't appeared all this while, strode out and came to Chu Wuming with a smile. Third brother, although we are competitors now, we brothers are still of the same blood. Blood is thicker than water. Now that Shao Chen is trying to kill fifth brother, not only are you not going to help, but you are also going to protect Shao Chen. If that's the case, then I, as the big brother, can't agree to it. Chu Wuck's words were filled with righteousness, but his purpose was obvious. He was telling Chu Wuming to give up. Today, he was here. Chu Wuming and his Fighting Dragon Battalion should just watch the show and let Chu Wushuang's Tiger Battalion kill Shao Chen. Hearing Chu Wuck's words, Chu Wuming's expression turned ugly. However, there was no time to hesitate. He gritted his teeth and shouted coldly, Fighting Dragon Battalion, listen to my order. Protect Shao Chen with all your strength. Kill whoever dares to stop you. Chu Wuming knew that Chu Wuck would definitely stop him. However, since he had already made his decision, Chu Wuming no longer hesitated and coldly shouted. Hearing that, Chu Wuck also coldly shouted, Venomous Python Battalion, listen to my order. Stop the Fighting Dragon Battalion. The 2 of them gave their orders one after another. For a moment, the Fighting Dragon Battalion and the Venomous Python Battalion were engaged in a fierce battle. With the Venomous Python Battalion blocking them, the Fighting Dragon Battalion couldn't get close to Shao Chen at all. At the same time, Shao Chen was also surrounded by the Tiger Battalion. The Imperial Guards couldn't compare at all. The Tiger Battalion, Venomous Python Battalion, and Fighting Dragon Battalion each had 2,000 people. Although the number was small, they were all elite. The ordinary soldiers in the 3 battle camps were all at the Dao Querying Realm. Moreover, they were not ordinary Dao Querying Realm martial artists, but Dao Querying Realm martial artists who had been through countless battles. On the other hand, above the 2,000 ordinary soldiers were a group of 100, and they were led by the captains. The captains' cultivations were at the Dao Confirmation Realm. At the same time, there were 2 vice battalion commanders above the captains, and they were at the Dao Transformation Realm. The battalion commanders were above the vice battalion commanders, and they were at the Dao King Realm. Shao Chen naturally couldn't withstand such a battle force. It wasn't as easy as when he killed the Imperial Guards. At this moment, Shao Chen was being pushed back by the Huban camp. Seeing that Shao Chen's injuries were increasing, Shao Chen's expression changed drastically. The tears in his eyes could not be stopped, and he did not care about his own cultivation. He immediately prepared to charge into the battlefield and fight alongside Shao Chen. Look at Shao? Shao Chen, who was about to join the battle, immediately shouted angrily. Shao! Shao? Her cultivation was too low. She was clearly not qualified to participate in such a battle. She stopped Shao Zhan. Shao Chen unconsciously glanced at Chu Wuming. Previously, Chu Wuming's hesitation had disappointed Shao Chen, but in the end, Chu Wuming still chose to join the battle. Although he didn't know what kind of struggle Chu Wuming had gone through, Chu Wuming's final decision made Shao Chen truly approve of this person. He admitted that Chu Wuming was blinded by the benefits of the imperial family, but other than that, Chu Wuming was also a very loyal person. At least this time, he didn't give up on Shao Chen for the sake of benefits. While fighting fiercely with the Huban camp soldiers, Shao Chen shouted, "Your Highness, please protect Shao for me." Hearing Shao Chen's words, Chu Wuming's expression turned ugly, but he still obeyed and came to Zhao's side. Shao Chen stood beside him to protect him. After dealing with Shao, Shao Chen secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Then, a trace of determination flashed in his eyes. Through the heavy encirclement of the Huban camp soldiers, Shao Chen looked at the fifth prince, who was sneering. "Do you think I can't kill you with the Huban camp?" His storage ring flashed and a voice transmission talisman appeared in Shao Chen's hand. Without hesitation, Shao Chen directly used the voice transmission talisman. It was impossible for Shao Chen to deal with the Huban battalion by himself. Aside from the fact that the ordinary soldiers of the Huban battalion were all at the Dao Querying Realm, there were also 4 captains at the Dao Validation Realm, 2 deputy battalion commanders at the Dao Transformation Realm, and a battalion commander at the Dao King Realm. With such strength, Shao Chen naturally couldn't deal with them alone. Therefore, Shao Chen sent a message back to the Heavenly Stellar Residence. The message was very simple. It only had one sentence: "Monarch Pavilion, come quickly." Seeing Shao Chen use the voice transmission talisman, Chu Wushuang naturally knew that Shao Chen was asking for help from the Heavenly Stellar Residence. Instantly, Chu Wushuang shouted coldly, "Kill him! Kill him quickly!" Chu Wushuang naturally knew a little about the Heavenly Stellar Residence. He knew that there were many experts in the Heavenly Stellar Residence. Therefore, Chu Wushuang wanted to kill Shao Chen before the people of the Heavenly Stellar Residence arrived. Hearing Chu Wushuang's words, the Huban camp soldiers attacked even more ruthlessly. At the same time, the Huban camp's battalion commander, the middle-aged Dao King Realm cultivator, also directly attacked. Shao Chen's cultivation was only at the Dao Querying Realm, while he was a Dao King Realm expert. He was confident that he could kill Shao Chen instantly. Facing the Huban camp's battalion commander, Shao Chen didn't dare to be careless. He directly used several talismans to protect himself. However, even so, he only managed to avoid being killed by the battalion commander in an instant. Blood kept spurting out of his mouth and his injuries were getting worse. However, Shao Chen's eyes were still resolute. He just had to wait. As long as the people of the Heavenly Stellar Residence arrived, he would succeed. Seeing that Shao Chen's injuries were getting worse, Shao Chen couldn't stop crying. She was also sobbing uncontrollably. If it were not for Chu Wuming holding her back, she would have rushed into the battle and fought side by side with Shao Chen. While Shao Chen was struggling to hold on, the people of the Heavenly Stellar Residence received Shao Chen's message. Led by Zhang Qi and Sikong Ming, a total of 50 to 60 Heavenly Stellar Continent warriors swarmed out and rushed towards the Monarch Pavilion. Shao Chen's message was simple, but everyone could feel the seriousness of the matter. They didn't dare to delay and rushed over. In just a short time, the people of the Heavenly Stellar Residence arrived at the Monarch Pavilion. Standing in the air, the 2 Dao Masters, Zhang Qi and Sikong Ming, appeared first, followed by Gu Xiu and other Dao King Realm experts, then Dao Transformation Realm, Dao Validation Realm, and Dao Querying Realm experts. Soon, the people of the Heavenly Stellar Continent arrived. Standing in the air, they immediately saw Shao Chen, who was surrounded by the Huban camp. Zhang Qi and Sikong Ming's expressions immediately changed. At the same time, Shao Chen, who was struggling to resist and was seriously injured, suddenly burst out with killing intent the moment the people of the Heavenly Stellar Continent appeared. A furious roar came from his mouth and resounded through the sky. "Seniors, please stop them for me." Hearing Shao Chen's words, although Zhang Qi and the others didn't know what had happened, they didn't hesitate and immediately replied in unison, "Yes, sir. Please collect, vote, recommend." Chapter 403. Shao Chen shouted angrily. Hearing this, the people of Tianshan Continent, led by Zhang Qi and Sikong Ming, shouted in unison. Along with the shouts of the people of Tianshan Continent, Zhang Qi and Xikong Ming took the initiative to attack. The aura of Tao Master Realm soared into the sky. Feeling the aura of Zhang Qi and Xikong Ming, Chu Wushuang and the soldiers of Huban Camp were shocked. Chu Wushuang also had super experts of the Tao Master Realm around him, but they were not present now. In this way, the two super experts of the Tao Master Realm, Zhang Qi and Xikong Ming, were obviously unstoppable. Damn it, how can there be two Tao Master Realm experts in Tianqian residence? Chu Wushuang looked at the sky in disbelief and shouted coldly. For a long time, everyone thought that there was only one super expert in the Tao Master Realm in Heavenly Stellar Residence, and that was Zhang Qi. After all, Xikong Ming had never left Heavenly Stellar Residence from the beginning to the end, so no one in the capital knew of Xikong Ming's existence. Now, because of Xiao Chen's message, everyone in Tianqian residence hurried over. The appearance of two Tao Master Realm experts made Chu Wushuang very depressed. Not only that, behind Zhang Qi and Xikong Ming, Gu Xiu and several other Tao King Realm experts also attacked. Dozens of warriors of Tianqian continent had the lowest cultivation of Tao Querying Realm. With everyone's help, especially Zhang Qi and Xikong Ming, the situation of the battle was completely reversed in the blink of an eye. In terms of numbers, Huban Camp had an absolute advantage. However, Zhang Qi and Xikong Ming were Tao Masters, so no one in Huban Camp could stop them. Moreover, Huban Camp only had one Tao King Realm expert, while Tianqian continent had 6 Tao King Realm experts. When Chu Wushuang saw that the Huban Camp was stopped by a few dozen people, he could no longer remain calm. He shouted coldly, "Set up the formation." Huban Camp had mastered a set of battle formations, which had great power. Facing the people of Tianqian continent, Chu Wushuang did not hesitate and ordered Huban Camp to set up the formation. With Chu Wushuang's angry shout, the people of Huban Camp immediately separated in an orderly manner. At the same time, there was a connection between the people of Huban Camp. This was the power of a battle formation, which could make an army erupt with great combat strength. The battle formation mastered by Huban Camp was called the Fierce Tiger Battle Formation. It was the first time that the people of Tianqian continent encountered a battle formation. After all, there was no such thing as a battle formation in Tianqian continent. Actually, when all was said and done, battle formations and talisman formations were similar in nature. However, talisman formations were set up with talismans, whereas battle formations were set up with people. This was the most fundamental difference between the two. Using people to set up the matrix meant that there were many more changes to the war. The battle matrix was formed, and soon, the people from the Heavenly Chen continent were surrounded by the matrix. Seeing this, Xiao Chen was not in the mood to observe the battle matrix. He shouted coldly, "Break this damn matrix!" Xiao Chen wanted to break the battle formation, but the people who did not understand war knew that there was only one way to break the battle formation, and that was to use brute force to break the battle formation. In this way, it was unavoidable to kill people. Zhang Qi did not know what happened to Xiao Chen. Hearing this, she said hesitantly, "Young master, if we want to break the battle formation by force, we must kill these soldiers. What about the imperial family?" With the strength of Tianqian continent, it was not impossible to break the battle formation. Zhang Qi was worried about how to explain it to the imperial family if they killed these soldiers. Hearing Zhang Qi's words, Xiao Chen replied coldly, "Then just kill them. Even if I have to destroy the entire Huban camp, I will not hesitate to do so." Without breaking the battle formation, they could not kill the 5th prince. Xiao Chen was not in the mood to care about the imperial family's feelings. No matter the price, the 5th prince must die today. Seeing Xiao Chen's determined face, Zhang Qi guessed that something must have happened today to make Xiao Chen so angry. She glanced at Xikong Ming. Xikong Ming nodded slightly. His meaning was obvious. He would follow Xiao Chen's arrangement. Seeing that Xikong Ming had no objection, Zhang Qi shouted, Break the battle formation with all your strength. Xiao Chun did not care about the life of Huban camp. Even if he had to flatten the entire camp, he would chop off the fifth prince's head. Following Zhang Qi's shout, everyone from Tianshan continent attacked with all their strength. Don't underestimate the dozens of people from Tianshan continent. With everyone attacking with all their strength, the ferocious tiger battle formation of Huban camp was in imminent danger. They did not expect the Tianshan residents to be so powerful. Aside from Chu Wuming, the others did not know much about the Tianshan residents. Naturally, they did not expect the Tianshan residents to have so many experts hidden in it. It was not an exaggeration to say that the Tianshan residents' strength was enough to suppress the 8 great feudal lords. None of the 8 great feudal lords were a match for the Tianshan residents. Only the imperial family and the 4 great princes had the ability to suppress the Tianshan residents. The heavenly stellar residents, which had suddenly appeared, possessed such power. Everyone's expression changed greatly, including Chu Wushuang and Chu Wuk. Casualties had already begun to appear among the soldiers of Huban camp. Chu Wushuang was already burning with rage when he saw the soldiers dying one after another at the hands of the Tianshan residents. As for the 5th prince, although he was still protected by the talisman, his face had already turned pale. Anyone could tell that the ferocious tiger battle formation could not stop the Tianshan residents. Although the battle formation was powerful, there was a limit to it. Facing the Tianshan residents, the ferocious tiger battle formation clearly could not last for long. What a joke! The ferocious tiger battle formation could not trap Zhang Qi and Sikong Ming, not to mention Gu Xiu and other Dao King realm experts and other people. After all, there was no super expert at the Dao Master realm in the Huban camp. If there was a super expert at the Dao Master realm in the Tiger battle formation, they might be able to fight against the people of the heavenly stellar residents. Unfortunately, the strongest person in the Tiger battle formation was only at the Dao King realm. With him overseeing the ferocious Tiger battle formation, he could only trap one Dao sovereign at most. That was already the limit. Seeing that the casualties of the Huban battalion were getting heavier and heavier, Zhang Qi and the others acted without any scruples under Xiao Chen's command. They did not show any mercy. Looking at everything in front of him, Chu Wushuang's heart was already dripping blood. This Hu Ben camp was a sharp sword in his hand. Now, in just a short period of time, the number of casualties had already exceeded 100. If this continued, even if the Hu Ben camp was not completely annihilated, it would obviously be completely crippled. Damn it! Chu Wushuang cursed in his heart. He could not understand how the Tianshan residents could be so powerful, and how could they conceal their strength so deeply. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 404. The heavenly stellar residents' strength had exceeded everyone's expectations. He was extremely furious as he watched everything coldly. After that, Chu Wushuang had no choice but to seek help from the imperial family. Just the Huban camp alone was clearly unable to stop the heavenly stellar residents. Moreover, Chu Wuk's venomous python camp was locked in an intense battle with Chu Wuming's battle dragon camp, so they were unable to deal with the heavenly stellar residents. As a result, he could only seek help from the imperial family. Even though Chu Wushuang didn't intend to seek help from the imperial family, Chu Wushuang would lose the initiative if he did that. He would have to listen to the imperial family's decision. However, he had no other choice now. Chu Wushuang took out another transmission talisman. He gritted his teeth and activated the talisman, sending a signal for help to the imperial family. Chu Wushuang shook his head and smiled bitterly when he saw that Chu Wushuang had asked for help from the imperial family. He hadn't expected the situation to develop to such a state. Even the Huban camp and venomous python camp had been mobilized, but they were still unable to take down Xiao Chun. It wasn't just Chu Wuk. Everyone present had seen Chu Wushuang send a signal for help. At this moment, The killing intent in Xiao Chen's eyes grew even stronger as he shouted coldly once more. Senior Zhang Qi, quickly break through the formation. The imperial family would be arriving very soon. If they arrived, then it would be practically impossible for him to kill the fifth prince. Thus, he had to kill the fifth prince before the imperial family arrived. He urged everyone to speed up. Zhang Qi and the others worked even harder when they heard that. Under the lead of Zhang Qi and Xikong Ming, the Tiger Formation showed signs of collapse very quickly. The battalion commander, who was a Dao King, had been heavily injured by a single punch from Zhang Qi. If it weren't for the protection of the formation, he probably would have died already. Even the Dao King Realm battalion commander, that was the core of the formation, had been heavily injured, so a gap quickly appeared in the Tiger Formation. When he saw this gap appear, Xiao Chen didn't hesitate to charge out of the formation. He forcefully tore open a hole for Xiao Chen to break out of the formation. When they saw Xiao Chen rush out of the formation, and there was no one between Xiao Chen and the fifth prince to stop him, the expressions of everyone present changed drastically. Everyone was able to sense the intense murderous intent emanating from Xiao Chen. However, under the intense murderous intent, many people were wondering if Xiao Chen would really dare to kill the fifth prince. There were still many people who doubted Xiao Chen's courage. Seeing Xiao Chen walk over, Chu Wushuang, who was standing beside the fifth prince, shouted coldly, "Xiao Chen, what are you trying to do? Let me tell you, killing a prince is a crime punishable by death." Clearly, the Tiger camp couldn't be relied on now. There was no one who could stop Xiao Chen. When faced with Chu Wushuang's furious shout, Xiao Chen didn't leave at all. Instead, he strode over to the fifth prince. He was still under the protection of the talisman, but the protection of the talisman didn't give the fifth prince any confidence. When faced with Xiao Chen, who was brimming with killing intent, the fifth prince was indeed slightly flustered. The development of the situation was very different from what he had expected. Firstly, he wanted to buy time by infuriating Xiao Chen. He knew that Xiao Chen would definitely arouse killing intent towards him. All of this had been predicted by the fifth prince. However, the biggest problem was that the fifth prince had never expected Xiao Chen to be able to pass through the Tiger camp's line of defense. He wanted Xiao Chen to arouse killing intent towards him, but this didn't mean that he wanted Xiao Chen to really kill him. These were two completely different meanings. The two of them were only separated by the faint light shield formed by the talisman array. Without hesitation, Xiao Chen directly took out a talisman. This was an offensive talisman, and its grade was also at the top of the heaven class. The grade was the same, and it was completely enough to break the talisman protecting the fifth prince. Seeing that Xiao Chen had directly activated the talisman in his hand, Chu Wushuang wanted to shout angrily. However, at this time, Yang Heng forcibly pulled him back far away. After being pulled away by Yang Heng, Chu Wushuang's eyes finally showed a hint of anger. He said to Yang Heng in an extremely dissatisfied tone, "What are you doing? Why didn't you stop him? He wants to kill my fifth brother. What does it have to do with me who he wants to kill? Today, I said that I won't make a move, so I won't make a move. If you don't want to die, it's best that you stand there and don't move." In the face of Chu Wushuang's cold shout, Yang Heng replied indifferently. With Yang Heng's status, he naturally wouldn't listen to Chu Wushuang's words. The reason why he pulled Chu Wushuang away was because the two of them were friends, and Yang Heng didn't want Chu Wushuang to die at the hands of Xiao Chen. Yang Heng couldn't possibly save the fifth prince. As soon as he finished speaking, Xiao Chen's talisman suddenly exploded, and fiercely bombarded the light shield protecting the fifth prince. The two heaven-class talismans fiercely collided, and for a moment, the faint light shield around the fifth prince slowly dissipated. With the talisman broken, the fifth prince appeared in front of Xiao Chen without any protection. Facing Xiao Chen, who was holding the scarlet-edged sword and whose eyes were overflowing with murderous intent, the fifth prince was completely scared silly. His body unconsciously retreated, and he said in horror, Xiao Chen, you can't kill me. I'm a prince. If you kill me, my father won't let you off. You, the fifth prince, hurriedly begged for mercy, but Xiao Chen didn't say a word. He swept the Jian Yi in his hand without hesitation. At the same time that Xiao Chen made his move, an angry shout came from the horizon. Stop! The voice was extremely loud, and one could hear a strong sense of anxiety in it. Needless to say, it was a mighty one from the royal family. The mighty one from the royal family saw that Xiao Chen was about to kill the fifth prince from afar. That mighty one from the royal family hurried over and shouted, wanting Xiao Chen to stop. However, although the voice was heard by everyone, Xiao Chen's sword didn't stop. It flashed through the fifth prince's neck, and then the fifth prince's head flew into the air. Until his death, the fifth prince's eyes were filled with disbelief. Perhaps he never thought that he would be killed by Xiao Chen, and Xiao Chen actually dared to kill him. The fifth prince's head flew into the air, and the headless corpse fell down with a loud crash. Everyone was stunned when they saw this scene. Dead. The fifth prince was really dead. He was killed by Xiao Chen with a single strike. When the fifth prince died, the experts of the imperial family finally arrived. A total of 3 Dao masters stood in the air, looking at the headless corpse below in disbelief. They rushed over after receiving Chu Wushuang's request for help, but who would have thought that they were still a step too late? Moreover, Xiao Chen actually dared to kill the fifth prince. Things had developed to this point, which was beyond everyone's expectations. The 3 battalions, as well as the warriors of the heavenly Chen continent, who were still fighting fiercely, all stopped what they were doing. Countless pairs of eyes were locked on Xiao Chen. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 405. With the death of the fifth prince, the entire monarch pavilion fell into a strange silence. The people who were fighting fiercely just now all stood still with their eyes wide open. The 3 battalions stopped fighting, and so did the people of heavenly stellar residence. Even Zhang Qi and Sikong Ming were shocked when they saw Xiao Chen, who was holding the red-edged sword and covered in blood. The people of heavenly stellar residence had no idea what had happened to Xiao Chen. So when they saw Xiao Chen kill the fifth prince with a single strike, they were unable to react for a while. After a long while, Zhang Qi took a deep breath and whispered, "Something big has happened." Killing a prince was definitely a big deal. Unlike the others, Xiao Chen was not as shocked as the others. After killing the fifth prince, he slowly withdrew his killing intent and looked calmly at the 3 super experts in the Dao Master realm in the sky. After a long time, the people slowly came back to their senses. At this time, the 3 experts from the imperial family who had rushed over quickly landed in front of Xiao Chen. They first glanced at the fifth prince, whose head had been separated from his body, and then looked at Xiao Chen. They said coldly, "Xiao Chen, how dare you?" There was no need to ask for a reason to kill a prince. They could directly kill Xiao Chen. Just as the 3 experts from the imperial family shouted coldly and angrily, Zhang Qi and Sikong Ming also led a group of heavenly stellar residence warriors to Xiao Chen's side, in case the 3 experts from the imperial family suddenly attacked Xiao Chen. Although Xiao Chen had killed the fifth prince, the people of heavenly stellar residence did not care about the laws of the Moonless Empire. They only had one thought in their minds, and that was to protect Xiao Chen no matter what. At worst, they would completely fall out with the imperial family. Faced with the actions of the heavenly stellar residence cultivator, the coldness in the eyes of the 3 imperial family experts grew even more intense. One of them even shouted coldly, "What? Is your heavenly stellar residence planning to rebel?" In the face of this person's cold yell, no one responded. However, Zhang Qi and Sikong Ming stepped forward and shielded Xiao Chen behind them. Their meaning was self-evident. In their eyes, only Xiao Chen existed. If the royal family dared to make a move on Xiao Chen today, there was only one way to go. The 3 experts of the imperial family burned with rage as they watched the actions of Zhang Qi and Li Jie. They knew that once they attacked, they would definitely become enemies with the Heaven's Day Pavilion. With the strength of the imperial family, they naturally didn't fear the members of the Heaven's Day Pavilion, and the only one they truly feared was the heaven-scorching ruler. After all, he was a great figure at the Tao Emperor realm. For a moment, they were at a loss of what to do. Just as the two sides were in a stalemate, Xiao Qin walked out from behind Zhang Qi and spoke to the three powerhouses of the royal family. "Can all of you make a decision on this matter?" He spoke in an incomprehensible manner. The three of them didn't reply when they heard this because Xiao Qin still had more to say. Sure enough, after pausing for a moment, Xiao Qin continued. "It's pardonable that I killed the fifth prince, but all of you clearly can't make a decision on this matter. So, I think all of you should allow His Majesty to make a decision himself." The meaning behind Xiao Qin's words was very clear. He'd killed the fifth prince, so logically speaking, the three of them could directly kill him. However, due to Xiao Qin's identity, the three of them didn't dare to do so because there was a great figure at the Tao Emperor realm standing behind Xiao Qin. In this way, it was best to allow Chu Mu to make a decision on this matter himself. When they heard Xiao Qin, the three powerhouses of the royal family exchanged glances, and then one of them spoke. "You're right. However, you have to come with us tonight. We must imprison you in the celestial prison before His Majesty makes a decision." They gave up on the idea of killing Xiao Qin on the spot, because not to mention whether they could succeed or not, offending a great figure at the Tao Emperor realm was an extremely terrifying matter indeed. So, it was better to directly toss this hot potato to His Majesty to make a decision himself. When they heard that they intended to imprison Xiao Qin in the celestial prison, Zhang Qi and Sikong Ming instantly emanated a strand of faint killing intent. Obviously, even then, the two of them didn't agree. After all, who knew if these fellows would annihilate Xiao Qin in the celestial prison? Xiao Qin's safety was absolutely their number one priority. However, Xiao Qin shot Zhang Qi and Sikong Ming a gaze that told them not to worry. He'd really killed the fifth prince out of rage because the fifth prince had actually dared to defile Xiao Qin. This was something that Xiao Qin couldn't tolerate. However, even though he was furious, Xiao Qin actually had a plan in his heart when he killed the fifth prince. He seemed to be furious, but he wasn't a rash person, and he could be said to be meticulous even though he was crude. After all, this plan wouldn't just be able to help him escape, it would even be able to help Chu Wuming ascend to the position of crown prince. To be honest, if Chu Wuming hadn't appeared from the beginning to the end, Xiao Qin would definitely have killed his way out of the Wuyue Empire with the people of the Tianqin residence. However, there was no need for that now. Chu Wuming's actions had already gained Xiao Qin's approval. Therefore, Xiao Qin's thoughts had also changed. Originally, he planned to use Chu Wuming to gain a foothold in the Wuyue Empire. Xiao Qin didn't really care whether Chu Wuming could really ascend to the position of crown prince. Because of this, although Xiao Qin had helped Chu Wuming a lot, it didn't actually have any substantial effect. Moreover, to be honest, Xiao Qin didn't spend too much effort on Chu Wuming. There was only one reason for this. Chu Wuming hadn't gained Xiao Qin's approval. Therefore, Xiao Qin couldn't really help Chu Wuming. However, it was different now. Although Chu Wuming's actions tonight were hesitant in the beginning, it was precisely because of this hesitation that his true feelings could be seen. Even though he knew that it wouldn't bring him any benefits, Chu Wuming still chose to take action in the end. He even didn't hesitate to mobilize the battling dragon camp. It was precisely because of Chu Wuming's actions that Xiao Qin wanted to help Chu Wuming ascend to the position of crown prince from the bottom of his heart. No one knew that Xiao Qin already had a plan at this moment. Xiao Qin signaled Zhang Qi and Xiao Qin with his eyes, indicating for them to calm down. Then, Xiao Qin said to the three experts from the imperial family, "All right, but I still have two more words to say." After speaking, without waiting for the three experts' agreement, Xiao Qin slowly walked towards Xiao Qin. Xiao Qin walked towards Xiao Qin. Seeing Xiao Chen walking towards her, Xiao Chen immediately rushed into Xiao Chen's arms. She immediately rushed into Xiao Chen's arms with a worried look on her face. In response, Xiao Chen comforted her gently, "Don't worry, I'll be fine. You should go back to Tianqian residence with the others first." He signaled to Xiao Chen. "Don't worry," but Xiao Chen wasn't worried at all. How could he not be worried? After killing the fifth prince, he was locked up in the imperial prison. This was clearly a desperate situation. He didn't say anything to Xiao Chen. There was no need to explain further, just to make her obedient. After a while, he handed Xiao Chen over to Zhang Qi and whispered a few words to her. Finally, Xiao Chen's gaze shifted to Chu Wuming. Obviously, Chu Wuming had something to say to Xiao Chen. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 406. Their eyes met, and Xiao Chen took the initiative to call out, "Your Highness." Upon hearing Xiao Chen's call, Chu Wuming smiled bitterly. His eyes were filled with complex emotions as he said, "Brother Xiao Chen, you. Sigh, forget it. I will try my best to save you. Even if I have to give up my position as the Eastern Palace Prince, I will definitely save Brother Zhao's life." Chu Wuming felt that Xiao Chen's actions were too impulsive. Killing the fifth prince in front of everyone was undoubtedly an extremely unwise move. He originally wanted to scold Xiao Chen, but when the words reached his mouth, he couldn't bring himself to say it. In the end, he could only sigh helplessly. Chu Wuming's idea was simple. Now that things had escalated to this point, his position as the crown prince was probably in jeopardy. If that was the case, then he would use the last of his strength to save Xiao Chen's life. Upon hearing Chu Wuming's words, Xiao Chen's heart warmed. He had completely acknowledged Chu Wuming. With a smile, Xiao Chen moved his head closer to Chu Wuming's ear and whispered in a volume that only the two of them could hear. "Your Highness, come to the celestial prison tonight to find me. Xiao Chen has something to say. I believe that with your Highness's ability, it shouldn't be difficult." Chu Wuming didn't know what Xiao Chen meant by asking Chu Wuming to come to the celestial prison tonight. Of course, he also didn't expect that Xiao Chen already had a plan in mind. It seemed like he had killed the fifth prince recklessly, but in fact, that wasn't the case. Without giving Chu Wuming a chance to reply, Xiao Chen finally nodded slightly to Zhang Qi and the others. Then, he left the Emperor's pavilion under the lead of the three powerhouses from the Imperial Palace. After Xiao Chen left, everyone looked at each other in dismay. However, all of them had the same thought, and that was that Xiao Chen was dead meat. Of course, they obviously didn't know how powerful Xiao Chen was. In the heavenly Chen mainland, Xiao Chen was able to convince Gudu Wuyao, Huang Fuao, and the others to become the publicly acknowledged leader of the 10 Great Prides. His talent was one thing, but other than that, Xiao Chen's temperament could not be underestimated. They couldn't remember how many times Xiao Chen had relied on his perfect plan to turn the situation around in the face of despair. It was also because of this that Gudu Wuyao and the others listened to Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen was imprisoned in the celestial prison. At the same time, over 1,000 imperial guards directly under the imperial palace arrived at the emperor's pavilion. At the same time, a personal servant by Chu Mu's side brought along Chu Mu's imperial edict. The edict was very simple. Everyone was to immediately disperse, and at the same time, they were not to discuss what happened tonight in private. The follow-up work was handled by the imperial guards sent by Chu Mu. Very quickly, everyone left one after another. However, everyone clearly knew that this matter was not over. Although the imperial family appeared to be relatively calm, this was only because of the Burning Sky ruler. If it was anyone else, they would have already been executed. Because of Xiao Chen's instructions, everyone in the Heavenly Stellar Residence returned to the Heavenly Stellar Residence. As for Chu Wuming, he secretly headed to the Celestial Prison. Indeed, as Xiao Chen said, secretly entering the Celestial Prison was not difficult for Chu Wuming. After Xiao Chen was imprisoned in the celestial prison, Chu Wuming arrived just 2 hours later. As the celestial prison where the imperial palace imprisoned serious criminals, the environment was naturally incomparably gloomy and damp. Furthermore, all the criminals in the celestial prison were imprisoned individually. At the same time, every cell was filled with talismans. These talismans were called spirit-dispersing talismans. As the name implied, once a cultivator was imprisoned, they would be unable to condense their spiritual energy. Therefore, they would naturally lose their battle strength. The security could be said to be extremely tight. After Chu Wuming's arrival, the guards in charge of guarding Xiao Chen retreated one after another, leaving space for Xiao Chen and Chu Wuming. Sitting cross-legged in the cell, Xiao Chen smiled when he saw Chu Wuming enter. "Your Highness, please take a seat." Seeing Xiao Chen's calm expression, Chu Wuming sat opposite Xiao Chen and said unhappily, "Brother Xiao Chen, you're still so calm at this time. Do you know, Your Highness, there's no need to be impatient. Who said that I'm doomed? This time, not only will I be fine, but I can also guarantee that I will help Your Highness obtain the position of Crown Prince." Hearing Chu Wuming's words, Xiao Chen said with a smile. Hearing this, Chu Wuming was immediately stunned. What did this mean? Could it be that Xiao Chen already had a way to resolve this? It was somewhat unbelievable. How was this possible? The current situation, no matter how one looked at it, was a dead end. Even their lives were in danger, let alone the position of Crown Prince. Before coming here, Chu Wuming had already received news that his royal father, Chu Mu, had already gone to pay a visit to Chu Qingshan and Xiao Chen. As such, the meaning behind this was very clear. Chu Mu wanted Chu Qingshan and Xiao Chen to deal with the Burning Sky ruler. Not caring about Chu Wuming's expression, Xiao Chen said confidently, "Your Highness, there's no need to worry. Just do as I say and you'll be able to avert the danger." "All right, since Brother Xiao has said so, I'll do as Brother Xiao says." Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Chu Wuming helplessly nodded in response. The smile on his face grew even wider. Afterwards, Xiao Chen told Chu Wuming everything he needed him to do. After listening to Xiao Chen's entire plan, Chu Wuming's expression was incomparably doubtful. "Brother Xiao, are you sure this will work?" "Of course. Your Highness, just do as I say and you'll definitely succeed," Xiao Chen said with a smile. After staying at Xiao Chen's place for over 2 hours, Chu Wuming still hadn't come back to his senses even after he left the celestial prison. He didn't understand what Xiao Chen was thinking. He actually wanted him to convince Chu Wushuang and Chu Wuk. How was that possible? Those two couldn't wait for Xiao Chen to die. How could they possibly stand up and speak up for Xiao Chen at a time like this? Chu Wuming was incomparably puzzled. Regarding this, Xiao Chen also gave his own explanation. He told Chu Wuming that when he saw Chu Wushuang and Chu Wuk, he only needed to say that he, Chu Wuming, was willing to leave the imperial capital. However, the condition was that Chu Wushuang and Chu Wuk had to exonerate Xiao Chen, using his departure from the imperial capital as a condition in exchange for Chu Wushuang and Chu Wuk's help. To put it bluntly, this was Chu Wuming expressing that he would no longer fight for the position of Crown Prince as long as Chu Wushuang and Chu Wuk could help him save Xiao Chen's life. Although Chu Wuming was unwilling to give up the position of Crown Prince, he didn't have any other choice now. However, before he left, Xiao Chen said mysteriously that Chu Wuming would only have the opportunity to obtain the position of Crown Prince if he left the imperial capital. This made Chu Wuming even more puzzled. Leaving the imperial capital was equivalent to leaving the center of power of the Moonless Empire. Thus, how could he fight for the position of Crown Prince? Xiao Chen didn't explain this. Chu Wuming's heart was filled with doubts. However, due to his trust in Xiao Chen, Chu Wuming still chose to do as Xiao Chen said. Without hesitation, after leaving the celestial prison, Chu Wuming went straight to Chu Wushuang's residence. Chapter 407. It was already late at night. In his palace, when Chu Wushuang heard that Chu Wuming had come to visit, a cold smile appeared on his face. My third brother coming to visit so late at night is something that has never happened before, haha. As for Chu Wuming's visit, Chu Wushuang clearly guessed his goal. If it wasn't for Xiao Qin, who else could it be? It seemed that Chu Wuming truly valued Xiao Qin and couldn't bear to see him die. However, Xiao Qin had killed the fifth prince in front of everyone. Even with Chu Wuming's abilities, it would be hard to protect him. Thus, Chu Wuming thought of his second brother. If he could join forces with Chu Wushuang, perhaps he could save Xiao Qin's life. Chu Wushuang naturally knew that Chu Mu had come to visit Chu Qingshan and Chu Mubai late at night. He knew that his father was probably preparing to make a move on Xiao Qin. With a cold smile on his face, Chu Wushuang said to the person in front of him, "Let my third brother come in. This is the first time he has asked me for a favor. I can't refuse him at the door." Chu Wushuang decided to meet this Chu Wuming, but he did not plan to lend a helping hand. The purpose of meeting Chu Wuming was only to ridicule him. If he wanted him to lend a hand to save Xiao Qin, it was simply a fool's dream. Hearing Chu Wushuang's words, the person respectfully replied and immediately retreated. Not long after, Chu Wuming walked in under the lead of the person from the temple. Sitting on the main seat, his gaze was full of ridicule as he looked down at Chu Wuming. Chu Wushuang laughed. "Third brother coming to find me so late at night, there must be something urgent. If there's anything you need, just say it. You and I are brothers. If I can help, I definitely won't refuse." None of them had any intention of asking Chu Wuming to sit down. In the face of Chu Wushuang's sarcastic words, Chu Wuming didn't get angry. "If that's the case, then I'll get straight to the point. I came here in the middle of the night because I hope that you can save Xiao Qin's life." He didn't beat around the bush. In any case, Chu Wushuang had already guessed the purpose of his visit. Hesitating would only make him more unscrupulous. Seeing that Chu Wuming had directly stated his intentions, the smile on Chu Wushuang's face became even wider. He slowly got up and walked over to Chu Wuming. He looked at Chu Wuming as if he was looking at an idiot and sneered. "Haha, my good third brother, your second brother had always thought that you weren't too stupid. Why did you do such a stupid thing today? Do you think it's possible for me to save Xiao Qin's life? Haha." It was impossible for him to save Xiao Qin. In fact, it would be a miracle if Chu Wushuang didn't add insult to injury. Hearing Chu Wushuang's words, Chu Wuming calmly said, "What if I'm willing to withdraw from the capital in exchange for second brother's help? Will second brother still refuse me taking the initiative to leave the imperial capital?" Hearing Chu Wuming's words, it was just as Xiao Qin had said. The smile on Chu Wushuang's face immediately froze. Then, with an expression of disbelief, he asked, "What did you just say?" "I said, I'm willing to take the initiative to leave the imperial city and never step into the imperial city again in my life in exchange for second brother's help." Facing Chu Wushuang's question, Chu Wuming said with a powerful and resonating voice. His expression was extremely serious and didn't seem like he was joking at all. Hearing Chu Wuming's words, Chu Wushuang fell silent and no longer ridiculed Chu Wuming. He turned around and sat down in the main seat. Frowning in contemplation, Chu Wushuang never thought that Chu Wuming would actually offer such a condition. Taking the initiative to leave the capital was equivalent to Chu Wuming giving up the fight for the position of crown prince. In this way, Chu Wushuang would have one less opponent. It had to be said that Chu Wuming's conditions made it impossible for Chu Wushuang to refuse, nor did he have any reason to refuse. The reason why Chu Wushuang was so eager to get rid of Xiao Qin was to weaken Chu Wuming's strength, so that Chu Wuming no longer had the qualifications to threaten him. Now that Chu Wushuang took the initiative to leave the capital, the result would be the same and even more thorough. As long as Chu Wuming truly left the capital, the threat he posed to him would naturally disappear. In the face of Chu Wushuang's silence, Chu Wuming didn't say anything and quietly waited for his answer. After a while, Chu Wushuang put away his smile and looked at Chu Wuming with an equally serious expression. Third brother, are you serious? Absolutely not. As long as second brother is willing to help, I will immediately withdraw from the capital. Chu Wushuang seriously replied Chu Wuming. He didn't have the slightest intention of joking. Seeing this, Chu Wushuang finally said, All right, since third brother is so determined, I naturally have no reason to refuse. However, there is one thing. I can help, but I can't guarantee the outcome. If Imperial Father is still unwilling to let go of Shaoqin, then third brother must immediately leave the capital. How about it? Chu Wushuang agreed to help, but he couldn't guarantee success. Hearing this, Chu Wuming nodded and said, All right, as long as second brother is willing to help, no matter what the outcome is, I promise to immediately leave the capital. Haha, good. Then it's settled. However, third brother, don't worry. Even if you leave the imperial capital, second brother will definitely give you a king's position in the future and let you be a free and unfettered king. I will definitely not treat third brother unfairly. Haha. The two of them reached an agreement and Chu Wushuang also laughed loudly in joy. After convincing Chu Wushuang, Chu Wuming didn't stay for long and hurriedly rushed to Chu Wushuang's temporary residence. Just like Chu Wushuang, Chu Wuming also offered his own conditions to leave the capital. However, unlike Chu Wushuang, Chu Wuming was clearly more stable and shrewd. It was precisely because of this that Chu Wuming didn't immediately agree after hearing his conditions. Instead, he spoke with deep meaning. Third brother is willing to leave the capital for Shaoqin. Don't you think it's a bit too much? Moreover, big brother Rong, let me say something unpleasant. Even if third brother doesn't leave the capital, after this incident, third brother probably won't have the strength to fight for the position of crown prince anymore, right? After this incident, Chu Wuming was clearly greatly affected. After all, Shaoqin was one of his people. Now that Shaoqin killed the fifth prince, Chu Wuming couldn't escape the blame. Faced with Chu Wuming's words, Chu Wuming's expression didn't change at all. He spoke according to what Shaoqin had taught him. Big brother sees things clearly. Indeed, after this incident, it's impossible for me to fight for the position of crown prince anymore. First of all, I won't be able to get through father. However, big brother has thought of another possibility. That is, if I side with second brother, what will you do? These words were taught to Chu Wuming by Shaoqin. Before this, Shaoqin had already guessed what kind of obstacles Chu Wuming would encounter when facing Chu Wushuang and Chu Wuk. There was no need to mention Chu Wushuang as he was easy to deal with. The only difficult one was Chu Wuk, because he was more vicious. However, even so, Shaoqin had absolute confidence in convincing Chu Wuk because Chu Wuk had no choice but to agree to this matter. As expected, after hearing Chu Wuming's words, Chu Wuk's expression immediately changed and a cold glint flashed across his eyes. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 408. These words were taught to Chu Wuming by Shaoqin. Compared to Chu Wushuang, Chu Wuk was obviously harder to persuade. However, this was fine because Chu Wuming had a bargaining chip that forced Chu Wuk to lower his head. For a long time, the battle between Chu Wuk, Chu Wushuang, and Chu Wuming for the position of crown prince could be said to be abnormally intense. Although Chu Wuming was always the weaker party, the fact that he was able to persist for so long was enough to prove one thing. Whether it was Chu Wuk or Chu Wushuang, both of them were somewhat helpless against Chu Wuming. This was why Chu Wuming had been struggling at death's door until now. It was only when he met Shaoqin that the situation changed. It was precisely because of this that Chu Wuming's power could not be underestimated. If Chu Wuming leaned towards either Chu Wuk or Chu Wushuang, then the other person could be said to have lost the ability to fight for the position of crown prince. Thus, it was not difficult to understand why Chu Wuk's expression suddenly changed when he heard Chu Wushuang's words. If Chu Wuming really leaned towards Chu Wushuang as he said, then Chu Wushuang's power would instantly far surpass his own. His gaze was fixed on Chu Wuming as a faint chill flickered in his eyes. After a while, Chu Wuk slowly opened his mouth and said, "Third brother, are you joking? After so many years, third brother has never thought of relying on someone else's charity. Why are you saying this now? Big brother, you're asking the obvious. For brother Xiaochen, I can even take the initiative to leave the imperial capital, let alone rely on second brother. To be honest, before I came here, I already went to look for second brother, and second brother has already agreed to my request. However, I'm afraid that second brother alone is not enough, so I came here. However, if big brother does not agree, then I will definitely lean towards second brother. If you don't believe me, big brother can try." Upon hearing Chu Wuming's words, Chu Wuming replied without backing down. Xiao Chen knew very well that it wouldn't be easy to get Chu Wuk to step forward and absolve him of his crime. He could only use this method to make Chu Wuk unable to refuse. As expected, after hearing Chu Wuming's firm reply, Chu Wuk hesitated. He knew very well that even if Chu Wuming didn't leave the imperial capital, after this incident, Chu Wuming would definitely suffer a huge blow. Therefore, whether Chu Wuming left the imperial capital or not wasn't important to Chu Wuk. It was precisely because of this that Chu Wuk obviously couldn't leave the imperial capital to exonerate Xiao Chen because of Chu Wuming. In Chu Wuk's opinion, it was safer to kill Xiao Chen than to let Chu Wuming leave the imperial capital. However, what Chu Wuk didn't expect was that Chu Wuming would actually use Chu Wushuang to threaten him. In the face of such a threat, Chu Wuk couldn't do anything. He couldn't be sure if Chu Wuming was telling the truth. After all, with Chu Wuming's character, he shouldn't have relied on someone else's charity. Otherwise, he wouldn't have bitterly endured for so many years. He couldn't be sure, but Chu Wuk couldn't gamble. If Chu Wuming really sided with Chu Wushuang in a fit of anger, wouldn't he be forcing himself into a dead end? He looked at Chu Wuming with a calm expression. At the same time, Chu Wuming also didn't avoid Chu Wuk's gaze. There wasn't the slightest flicker in his eyes. He wanted to see something from Chu Wuming's eyes, but Chu Wuk was destined to be disappointed. The two brothers stared at each other for a long time. In the end, Chu Wuk laughed loudly. "Haha, third brother, you're exaggerating. Since you've personally come, I, as your big brother, will definitely stand on your side. Don't worry, big brother knows what to do." Chu Wuk didn't have a choice, so he could only nod in agreement. Hearing Chu Wuk's words, Chu Wuming nodded slightly and said, "Then I'll have to thank big brother. After this matter is over, I will immediately leave the imperial capital and will no longer participate in the matter of the crown prince's position." Chu Wuming promised again. After that, the two brothers pretended to be polite for a while before Chu Wuming left. In just a short night, Chu Wuming visited Chu Wuk and Chu Wushuang one after another. Furthermore, both of them insisted on it. In this way, Xiao Chen's plan could be considered to have succeeded by more than half. The next step would be up to Xiao Chen himself. After all, Chu Wuming had already completed the task Xiao Chen assigned to him. The night passed in the blink of an eye. At noon on the second day, Xiao Chen, who was in the celestial prison, received a summons from Chu Mu. "He's finally here. He only summoned me after an entire night. This Chu Mu must have already arranged everything." With a faint smile on his face, Xiao Chen looked at the person in front of him and said, "Lead the way." A total of 4 Dao sovereigns escorted Xiao Chen to Wuha Palace. Along the way, the 4 of them acted as if they were facing a great enemy. They were afraid that the slightest accident would happen. Compared to the 4 of them, Xiao Chen, as the person in question, was very relaxed. It was as if he wasn't worried at all. Facing the relaxed and calm Xiao Chen, the 4 Dao sovereigns were puzzled. They wondered if Xiao Chen was stupid. He was clearly a person who was about to die, yet he could still remain so calm. Could it be that he thought that his uncle, the Burning Sky ruler, could save him? He was simply too naive. Although only a short night had passed, anyone with a discerning eye could tell that Chu Mu was fully prepared. Even if the Burning Sky ruler made a move, there would naturally be people who would stop him. It could be said that Xiao Chen didn't have the slightest chance. No one knew what Xiao Chen was thinking. Soon, under the escort of the 4 people, Xiao Chen arrived outside Wuha Palace. After a person from the temple announced his arrival, a sharp voice rang out from within Wuha Palace. Sinner Xiao Chen, enter the palace. Accompanied by the voice, Xiao Chen slowly walked into Wuha Palace under the escort of the 4 Dao sovereigns. This was Xiao Chen's first time entering Wuha Palace. The feeling that Wuha Palace gave Xiao Chen could only be described with 2 words: grand and magnificent. At this moment, the spacious palace was filled with civil and military officials. Chu Wuk, Chu Wushuang, and Chu Wuming stood at the head of the officials. As for Emperor Chu Mu, he sat on the dragon platform at the front of the palace. Seeing Xiao Chen enter the palace, everyone had different expressions. However, everyone knew that Xiao Chen probably wouldn't be able to walk out of Wuha Palace today. Even if he had an uncle like the Burning Sky ruler, it was impossible because Chu Mu had made thorough preparations. They escorted Xiao Chen all the way to the center of the palace. They didn't bow to Chu Mu. Facing such an indifferent Xiao Chen, Chu Mu didn't say much and went straight to the point. Xiao Chen, you killed the 5th prince in front of everyone last night. Let me ask you, do you admit to your crime? Haha, Your Majesty. May I ask what crime Xiao Chen committed? I killed him because he deserved to die. As a prince, his actions were worse than a dog's. Why can't I kill such a person? Your Majesty only saw me kill the 5th prince. Don't you think about what the 5th prince did? Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 409. Faced with Chu Mu's questioning, Xiao Chen's reply of, "What crime have I committed?" caused Chu Mu's face to instantly darken. Xiao Chen had killed his son in front of everyone, and now in front of all the civil and military officials. He did not even have the slightest hint of remorse. Of course, what Chu Mu didn't know was that Xiao Chen would still kill the 5th prince without any hesitation, let alone remorse. It was because the 5th prince deserved to die. His face darkened. At the same time, after hearing Xiao Chen's words, all the officials present shouted angrily. Stubborn, this person is simply stubborn. Your Majesty, I implore Your Majesty to immediately issue a decree to execute this person in public to appease the 5th prince's soul. All the officials spoke out, as if even eating Xiao Chen's flesh and drinking Xiao Chen's blood wouldn't be enough to appease their hatred. A disdainful smile appeared on his face, and he did not care about the insults of these people. Xiao Chen knew these people very well. Each and every one of them was a fence-sitter. Now that they saw that he was in trouble, it was only natural that they would want to stomp on him. Among all the officials, only those who had sided with the 3rd prince didn't scold him. For example, the Yang clan's patriarch, Yang Jian. As the patriarch of the Jiang, Shen, Han, and Yang clans, Yang Jian could be considered a powerful official in the imperial court. Seeing the crowd scolding Xiao Chen, Yang Jian's eyes were filled with complicated emotions. From Yang Jian's point of view, Xiao Chen had killed the 5th prince in front of everyone. This was already a huge disaster. Now, in front of all the officials and Chu Mu, Xiao Chen was still so unyielding. One had to know that in such a situation, the only way to survive was to get Chu Mu to nod his head and show mercy. According to Yang Jian's original plan, Xiao Chen should have admitted his guilt and sincerely repented after entering the palace of Wuha. That, coupled with the pleading of the 3rd prince and himself, might have been able to save Xiao Chen's life. However, who would have thought that Xiao Chen would show no signs of remorse in front of Chu Mu? On the contrary, he was still so unyielding. This made Yang Jian feel helpless. The palace of Wuha was in a state of chaos. Shouts and curses could be heard everywhere. Of course, these voices were all directed at Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen ignored the curses of the officials. After a while, Chu Mu raised his hand slightly and the officials quieted down, stopping the curses of the officials. Chu Mu looked at Xiao Chen and said coldly, Xiao Chen, I know what you're thinking. Do you think that you can be unrestrained with the heaven-burning retired emperor? Today, let me tell you, even the emperor is punished the same as the common people. You killed the fifth prince in front of everyone, which is a capital offense. Guards, drag Xiao Chen out and execute him. Xiao Chen said bluntly. Even the heaven-burning sovereign could not save him. Hearing Chu Mu's words, Xiao Chen laughed loudly. Ha ha, what a good the heaven-burning sovereign is guilty of the same crime as the commoners. Xiao Chen laughed loudly. Hearing his words, Chu Mu's face darkened. At the same time, the four Dao sovereigns stepped forward and prepared to take Xiao Chen away. But at this moment, Chu Wuming suddenly stepped forward. Father, please wait. Seeing Chu Wuming step forward at this time, Chu Mu's face darkened. He glared fiercely at Chu Wuming. However, Chu Wuming acted as if he did not see it and continued to speak. Father, Xiao Chen had his reasons for killing fifth brother. In my opinion, this matter cannot be completely blamed on Xiao Chen. Fifth brother was also at fault. I hope father can judge clearly. Chu Wuming took the initiative to plead for mercy for Xiao Chen. Seeing this, the ministers who followed Chu Wuming also spoke out. Your Majesty, the third prince's words are reasonable. That fifth prince is usually domineering and the commoners of the imperial city are complaining about him. Today, the fifth prince even took Xiao Chen's younger sister, Xiao Chen. Because of this, Xiao Chen killed the fifth prince. Your Majesty has always ruled the country with benevolence and righteousness. If you kill Xiao Chen now, I'm afraid it will damage Your Majesty's benevolence and virtue. I hope Your Majesty can agree. Your subject agrees. Your subject also agrees. I implore Your Majesty to reconsider. There were more than 10 ministers who followed Chu Wuming. At this moment, all of them stood out to plead for mercy for Xiao Chen. Seeing this, although Chu Mu had already expected this, when he truly faced it, his face was still filled with anger. I've already decided. Everyone, there's no need to say anything. Men, drag Xiao Chen away and behead him. Facing the pleading of the third prince and the others, Chu Mu coldly snorted and coldly shouted without any room for discussion. There were nearly 100 ministers in the entire palace. However, the third prince and the others who stood out to plead for mercy for Xiao Chen were only a dozen or so people. This was not enough to sway Chu Mu's decision. He was determined to kill Xiao Chen. However, at this moment, Chu Mu, as well as everyone else, did not expect Chu Wushuang to actually stand out. Chu Wushuang cupped his hands and bowed to Chu Mu. He said in a deep voice, Father, I feel that what third brother and the others said is reasonable. This matter should not be completely blamed on Xiao Chen. Fifth brother was also in the wrong. Therefore, I implore Father to show mercy and spare Xiao Chen's life. Chu Wushuang also stood out to plead for mercy for Xiao Chen. Hearing this, Chu Wushuang was momentarily stunned. The expressions of the ministers who followed Chu Wushuang also changed slightly. What was this situation? With the relationship between Chu Wushuang and Chu Wuming, how could the second prince, Chu Wushuang, stand out to plead for mercy for Xiao Chen? One had to know that the person who wanted Xiao Chen to die the most was probably Chu Wushuang. Chu Wuming's pleading was still within reason. However, Chu Wushuang's pleading caused everyone to be incomparably puzzled. However, what made everyone even more puzzled was that after Chu Wushuang stood out, Chu Wuk also stepped forward and cupped his hands towards Chu Mu. Father, I agree. I implore Father to reconsider and spare Xiao Chen's life in the name of Father's benevolence. Chu Wuk also stood out. Seeing this, the ministers and generals present were unable to remain calm. What was this situation? The three princes who were usually at loggerheads with each other. Why did they suddenly become united against a common enemy? They were actually pleading for mercy for Xiao Chen. This shouldn't be. Chu Wushuang and Chu Wuk were pleading for mercy for Xiao Chen. There was no reason for this, right? Their gazes coldly looked towards Chu Wuk and Chu Wushuang. At the same time, the two of them also secretly gave a look to the ministers who followed them. Their intentions were clear. They wanted them to plead for mercy for Shao Chen as well. Noticing the looks from Chu Wuk and Chu Wuk, the expressions of the ministers immediately became somewhat strange. Previously, they were still full of righteous indignation as they scolded Shao Chen. Now they actually stood out to plead for mercy for Shao Chen. Wasn't this the same as slapping themselves in the face? Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 410. Many of the ministers felt helpless, but they couldn't turn a blind eye to Chu Wushuang and Chu Wuk's gazes. In the end, they could only brace themselves and step forward. Your subjects implore your majesty to reconsider. The ministers who were cursing Shao Chen earlier all stepped forward to plead on Shao Chen's behalf. This sudden change was so sudden that even Chu Mu couldn't react in time. What was going on? Chu Wuming stepping forward to plead on Shao Chen's behalf was understandable, but Chu Wushuang and Chu Wuk also stepping forward was something Chu Mu didn't expect. Even the four supreme Dao sovereigns in charge of guarding Shao Chen were stunned. For a moment, they didn't know what to do. After all, 3 princes and nearly 40 ministers had stepped forward to plead on Shao Chen's behalf. This was enough to influence Chu Mu's decision. Chu Mu was speechless for a long time as he looked at the crowd below. This development was simply too strange. The 3 Chu Wuming brothers who had always been at loggerheads like fire and water were now pleading on Shao Chen's behalf. A strange glint flashed through Chu Mu's eyes. With so many people around, it was difficult for Chu Mu to act alone. Just as Chu Mu was feeling conflicted, a terrifying aura descended from the sky outside Wuha Palace. Chu Mu's expression darkened when he sensed this aura. He immediately guessed who it was. Who else could it be but the burning sky ruler? His figure appeared in the air above the imperial palace. At the same time, Chu Qingshan and Chu Mubai blocked the burning sky ruler's path. The two of them had been paying close attention to the Marshal He Palace's situation, so when the burning sky ruler appeared, Chu Qingshan and Chu Mubai appeared as well. Taoist blazing heaven, you. According to the agreement with Chu Mu, Chu Qingshan and the other two were responsible for stopping the blazing heaven ruler from interfering in this matter. But after meeting the blazing heaven ruler, Chu Qingshan spoke with a grave expression. Why did Chu Qingshan have such a solemn expression when he faced the burning heaven ruler? It was very simple. It was because the burning heaven ruler had broken through. Earlier, the burning heaven ruler's cultivation was at the perfection of the Tao Emperor realm, yet at this moment, the burning heaven ruler had shockingly attained perfection in the Tao Emperor realm. Moreover, the cultivation resources he'd gathered in the imperial capital had absolutely played a crucial role in his breakthrough. With the support of an unprecedented amount of resources, the burning heaven ruler finally completed his breakthrough. Even though it was only a breakthrough of a small realm, the difficulty involved in it was absolutely not to be underestimated. At the level of the Tao Emperor realm, even the slightest bit of improvement could be said to be a step further. Previously, among the rulers of the heavenly Qin continent, only the 9 heavens ruler and the pill cloud ruler had reached the great perfection of the Tao Emperor realm. The other rulers were all at the minor perfection of the Tao Emperor realm. Now, in just a few months after entering the heavenly river continent, the burning sky ruler had broken through. From this, it could be seen that the heavenly river continent's cultivation environment was much better than the heavenly Qin continent. The breakthrough in cultivation caused the burning sky ruler's strength to increase greatly. At the same time, Chu Qingshan and Chu Mubai couldn't remain as indifferent as before when facing the burning sky ruler again. Chu Qingshan was at the great perfection of the Tao Emperor realm, while Chu Mubai was at the minor perfection of the Tao Emperor realm. Originally, they could have defeated the burning sky ruler if they joined forces, but now that the burning sky ruler had broken through to the great perfection of the Tao Emperor realm, it was unrealistic for them to defeat him. Of course, this didn't mean that Chu Qingshan and Chu Mubai weren't a match for the Burning Sky ruler if they joined forces. Without a doubt, they could definitely suppress the Burning Sky ruler if they joined forces. However, it was too difficult to kill or suppress him. The Burning Sky ruler could escape unscathed. Facing Chu Qingshan and Chu Mubai's obstruction, the Burning Sky ruler said with a slightly gloomy expression, "What? You want to stop me?" Fellow Burning Sky, as the saying goes, every country has its laws and every family has its rules. Shao Chun killed the fifth prince in public. This is a fact. Chu Qingshan said calmly when he knew that the Burning Sky ruler had come to save Shao Chun. Following the Burning Sky ruler's breakthrough in cultivation, Chu Qingshan and Chu Mubai's fear towards him rose sharply. So, if they could avoid fighting, they obviously didn't want to fight the Burning Sky ruler. The Burning Sky ruler snorted coldly when he heard Chu Qingshan's words. "I'll only say it once. Get out of my way. If Chernur loses a single hair today, I'll definitely wipe out the entire Moonless Empire." He didn't have the slightest intention of wasting words with Chu Qingshan and Chu Mubai. Chu Qingshan and Chu Mubai's faces sank slightly when they heard the Burning Sky ruler's words. However, they knew in their hearts that the Burning Sky ruler wasn't exaggerating in the slightest. With his current strength, even if he wasn't a match for Chu Qingshan and Chu Mubai, dealing with the others in the Moonless Empire would be an easy task. Chu Qingshan and Chu Mubai couldn't possibly protect the entire Moonless Empire. Thus, who could stop the Burning Sky ruler from taking revenge? They didn't expect the Burning Sky ruler to break through at this time. The three stood facing each other. It was also at this moment that Chu Mu, who was in the Marshalsea Palace, finally made his decision. Internally, there were civil and military officials pleading for leniency. Externally, there was the Burning Sky ruler, an existence that couldn't be ignored. Thus, Chu Mu could only declare Shao Chen innocent in the end. After declaring Shao Chen innocent on the spot, Chu Mu didn't stay for long. Instead, he got up and left. What happened today was completely out of Chu Mu's expectations. It could be said that he was caught unprepared. Arriving in front of the innocent Shao Chen, Chu Wuming smiled and said, "Congratulations, brother Shao Chen. I still have to thank your highness for this. However, this is only the beginning. I'm afraid your highness will be busy for a period of time." Shao Chen replied with a smile when he heard Chu Wuming's words. His innocent escape was indeed only the beginning. After all, in order to convince Chu Wuk and Chu Wushuang, Chu Wuming had promised to leave the imperial capital. Hearing Shao Chen's words, Chu Wuming silently nodded. Then, under Shao Chen's invitation, the two left the Marshalsea Palace together and walked towards the heavenly stellar residence. There were some things that could be planned now. Just as Shao Chen and Chu Wushuang strode out of the Marshalsea Palace, they immediately saw the Burning Sky ruler, who was facing Chu Qingshan and Chu Wushuang. The three retired emperors stood in the air. Everyone bowed. At the same time, seeing that Shao Chen was fine, the Burning Sky ruler slowly landed in front of him. A rare smile appeared on his face. "Everything's fine? Everything's fine. Uncle Tian, let's go back first." Shao Chen smiled when he heard the Burning Sky ruler's words. Since Shao Chen was fine, the Burning Sky ruler naturally wouldn't continue to pester him. He nodded at Chu Qingshan and Chu Wushuang. Then, the three left the imperial palace together and rushed towards the heavenly stellar residence. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 411. After successfully escaping, they returned to the heavenly stellar residence. When Shao Chen and the others returned to the heavenly stellar residence, the moment they entered, Shao Wushuang, who was wearing a jade-green dress, entered the residence. She threw herself into Shao Chen's arms. "Brother, it's good that you're fine." Although it had only been a short night, Shao Wushuang was still worried. She had been worried sick. Now that Shao Chen had returned safely, the little girl was finally able to put her heart at ease. He gently patted Shao Wushuang's back. Xiao Qin smiled and said, "You're already so old, yet you're still crying." "I'm fine." He gently comforted Xiao Wushuang. After a few words, Xiao Qin cupped his hands and thanked everyone in the heavenly stellar residence. If not for everyone working together last night, it would have been impossible for him to kill the fifth prince. After expressing his gratitude, Xiao Qin brought Chu Wuming to the courtyard where he was staying, which was his study. Xiao Wushuang obediently brewed tea for the two, and then took the initiative to leave. Xiao Wushuang? She was not stupid. On the contrary, she was very intelligent. She knew that Xiao Qin and Chu Wuming had something to discuss. Hence, she consciously chose to leave. Wait for Xiao Wushuang? After Xiao Wushuang left, only Xiao Qin and Chu Wuming remained in the study. Chu Wuming looked at Xiao Qin and said, "Brother Xiao Qin, can you tell me where you want me to go after I leave the imperial capital?" Previously, Xiao Qin had said that if Chu Wuming wanted to become the crown prince, he had to take the initiative to leave the imperial capital. When faced with Chu Wuming's question, Xiao Qin did not hide anything. First, Xiao Qin told Chu Wuming where he should go after leaving the imperial capital. "Hulao Pass," Xiao Qin said indifferently as he looked at Chu Wuming. When Chu Wuming heard the words Hulao Pass, he was stunned at first. Then, he said with a puzzled expression, "Brother Xiao wants me to go to Hulao Pass? That's the border, and it borders the Heavenly Wolf Empire. Why would Brother Xiao want me to go there?" He couldn't figure out why Xiao Qin wanted him to go to Hulao Pass. Everyone knew that there were 3 empires and 2 sects in Danyang County where the Moonless Empire was located. There were 5 great powers. The Moonless Empire, the Heavenly Wolf Empire, and the Gale Empire were known as the 3 empires. The Celestial Equal Sect and the Qingyang Sect were known as the 2 sects. These 5 factions completely controlled the lifeline of the entire Danyang County. Among them, the 3 great empires had been at war for many years due to various reasons. This was especially so for places like Hulao Pass. As it was located at the border between 2 great empires, it was the battlefield between the 2 empires. One could say that Hulao Pass was a place where there was no profit at all, only war. War was definitely the main theme in Hulao Pass. However, when Xiao Qin asked him to go to Hulao Pass, Chu Wuming could not understand Xiao Qin's intentions. Xiao Qin was full of doubts. Seeing this, Xiao Qin smiled. "Your Highness only saw endless war in Hulao Pass. However, I would like to ask Your Highness, what else is there in Hulao Pass apart from war?" "What else is there apart from war?" This. After hearing Xiao Qin's words, Chu Wuming pondered. However, after a while, Chu Wuming shook his head helplessly. Apart from war, Chu Wuming really couldn't think of anything else in Hulao Pass. Seeing Chu Wuming shake his head, Xiao Qin said with a smile, "Hulao Pass has been at war for many years. In that case, does Your Highness know how many troops the Empire has stationed at Hulao Pass?" "I know. There are a total of 4 armies around Hulao Pass, with a total of more than 1,000,000 soldiers. Since Your Highness is aware, I wonder if Your Highness has heard of this saying. Since ancient times, only those with troops have the right to speak in the struggle for power. Right now, Your Highness and your 2 brothers only have the military authority of the Battle Dragon Camp and the other 2 camps, with a total of only 2,000 soldiers. If Your Highness has the military authority of more than 1,000,000 soldiers, what do you think will happen?" After hearing Xiao Qin's words, Chu Wuming was taken aback. Chu Wuming naturally understood what Xiao Qin meant. In Xiao Qin's opinion, instead of staying in the imperial capital to fight with Chu Wushuang and Chu Wuk, it would be better for him to head to Hulao Pass and firmly control the 1,000,000 soldiers there. With the military authority in his hands, his words would naturally have more weight. Thinking about it, with the support of 1,000,000 soldiers, who would be able to compete with Chu Wuming for the position of crown prince. After understanding Xiao Qin's meaning, Chu Wuming sank into silence. Seeing this, Xiao Qin did not rush him. After a long while, Chu Wuming finally came back to his senses. He looked at Xiao Chen and asked with uncertainty. Brother Xiao Chen's words are correct. However, will father allow me to take over the military authority of Hulao Pass? Chu Wuming thought that Xiao Chen wanted Chu Mu to issue a decree for him to take over the military authority of Hulao Pass. However, that was naturally impossible. How could Chu Mu allow Chu Wuming to control an army of more than 1,000,000 soldiers so easily? Xiao Chen smiled and shook his head as he replied. Naturally, it is impossible for His Majesty to issue an edict. Furthermore, there is no need for His Majesty to do so. What I meant by control is not just controlling the command of these 4 armies. Instead, I want all 4 armies to be under His Majesty's command. They will only be loyal to His Majesty. Of course, this is only the first step. Following this, Xiao Chen has other plans. However, everything still needs to go to Hulao Pass. That place is far away from His Majesty. In the imperial capital, no matter how much Chu Wuming jumped around, he would not be able to achieve anything. Although the competition for the position of Crown Prince could be said to be increasingly intense, to put it bluntly, everything was still under Chu Mu's control. As long as Chu Mu was still alive, no matter how Chu Wuming and the other 2 fought for the position of Crown Prince, in the end, it all depended on Chu Mu's words. Chu Wuming and the other 2 did not see through this. However, Xiao Chen did. That was why he suggested for Chu Wuming to leave the imperial capital. This would appear to be withdrawing from the competition for the position of Crown Prince. However, in reality, it was retreating in order to advance. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Chu Wuming gradually revealed a shocked expression. Xiao Chen did not only want the command of the 1,000,000-strong army in Hulao Pass, but he also wanted to completely take over the 1,000,000-strong army. Speaking frankly, Xiao Chen wanted to turn the 1,000,000-strong army into Chu Wuming's private army. They would only be loyal to Chu Wuming. Secretly seizing military power was no different from a rebellion. However, if he could truly obtain the loyalty of the 1,000,000-strong army, Chu Wuming did not doubt that the position of Crown Prince would be decided with a single word from him. At that time, even Chu Wuming would not be able to refuse because he had the 1,000,000-strong army under him eyeing him covetously. Brother Xiao Chen, are you doing this to help me obtain the position of Crown Prince, or do you want me to directly ascend to the throne? Chu Wuming asked in a daze as he looked at Xiao Chen. Haha, Your Highness is overthinking. What you want is Your Highness's matter. Xiao Chen is only responsible for removing obstacles for Your Highness, Xiao Chen replied with a smile after hearing Chu Wuming's words. Hearing this, Chu Wuming was silent for a while. Then, he stood up and said, I will enter the palace to see father and discuss the matter of going to Hulao Pass. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 412. Seeing Chu Wuming stand up, Xiao Chen reminded him, Your Highness, please pay attention to a few things. First, you must not let His Majesty see through your true thoughts, and you must not let His Majesty become suspicious. Second, Your Highness can give up everything else in the imperial capital, but you must not give up on the Royal Academy. You must firmly control the Human Academy Island in your hand. Hearing Xiao Chen's reminder, Chu Wuming nodded slightly, then left the heavenly stellar residence and headed straight for the imperial palace. Letting Chu Wuming go to Hulao Pass, Xiao Chen indeed wanted to help Chu Wuming obtain the position of Crown Prince. Even ascending to the supreme throne was not impossible. After the matter with the 5th prince, Xiao Chen completely approved of Chu Wuming. This person was indeed loyal and righteous, and because of this, Xiao Chen decided to wholeheartedly help Chu Wuming. Of course, this kind of help was not without selfishness. In Xiao Chen's opinion, once Chu Wuming successfully controlled the Moonless Empire, this place would become a paradise for the people of the heavenly Chen continent. In the future, when he found his parents, he could send them to live here and he would not have to worry about their safety. Because he wanted the Moonless Empire to become a truly safe place, Xiao Chen needed Chu Wuming to hold absolute power. Moreover, Chu Wuming was the only person in the Moonless Empire that Xiao Chen trusted. With him overseeing the Moonless Empire, the safety of the people of the Heavenly Chen continent in the Moonless Empire would not be a problem. Chu Wuming immediately entered the imperial palace. At the same time, Xiao Chen also began his preparations. This time, he would not return to the imperial capital in a short period of time, so Xiao Chen planned to bring some of his own people. After discussing with the Burning Sky ruler, the Burning Sky ruler agreed with Xiao Chen's decision. A total of 50,000 people from the Heavenly Chen continent had come to the Tianhe continent, so they really needed a truly safe place to protect themselves. Now, it seemed that the Moonless Empire was undoubtedly the best choice. He planned to bring a group of people with him to Hulao Pass. In the end, Xiao Chen chose 13 people, led by Zhang Qi, a super expert in the Dao Sovereign Realm. Below her were Gu Xiu and 2 other experts in the Dao King Realm, while the rest were all in the Dao Transformation Realm. There were not many people, but their strength should not be underestimated. 1 Dao Master, 2 experts in the Dao King Realm, 10 experts in the Dao Transformation Realm, a total of 13 people. 13 people in total, 13 people in the Dao King Realm to go to Hulao Pass. When he heard that Xiao wanted to go to Hulao Wuming, Xiao Chen wanted to go with him, but he was rejected by Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen's cultivation was still too low, so he would not be of much use in Hulao Pass. It was better for him to stay in the imperial capital. Anyway, before he left, Xiao Chen had already thought it through. He wanted Chu Wuming to send Xiao Chen to the academy. He wanted to send Xiao Chen to cultivate in the Royal Academy. This was the best choice. Not to give Xiao Chen? There was no room for argument. Xiao Chen could only accept Xiao Chen's arrangement helplessly. In the Royal Academy, Xiao Chen was not worried about Xiao Chen's safety. After all, although Chu Wuming had left the imperial capital, Xiao Chen had already told him that he could not let go of the Human Academy Island. Therefore, if Xiao Chen cultivated in the Royal Academy, Chu Wuming was fully capable of ensuring her safety. Everything was ready. Early the next morning, Chu Wuming personally came to the dustless residence and told Xiao Chen that Chu Mu had agreed to let him go to Hulao Pass. Chu Mu did not insist on Chu Wuming going to Hulao Pass. Perhaps from Chu Mu's point of view, after this incident, Chu Wuming no longer had any hope of fighting for the position of Crown Prince. Leaving the imperial capital like this was a wise choice. Therefore, when Chu Wuming suggested leaving the imperial capital for Hulao Pass, Chu Mu did not hesitate to agree. After obtaining Chu Mu's approval, Xiao Chen and Chu Wuming discussed for a while and decided to leave the next day. Among them, Du Qingfeng, Elder Du, who was beside Chu Wuming, did not follow Chu Wuming this time. Although Du Qingfeng was a Dao sovereign, he had more important matters to attend to in the imperial capital. That was to guard the Human Academy Island on behalf of Chu Wuming. Only Du Qingfeng, who was a Dao sovereign, could ensure the safety of the Human Academy Island. After settling the matter, Chu Wuming bid farewell and left. Before he left, Chu Wuming clearly had many things to deal with. While Chu Wuming was busy dealing with the matters of leaving the imperial capital, Chu Wushuang and Chu Wuk also received news of Chu Wuming's departure. Both of them were in a good mood. From their point of view, Chu Wuming's departure meant that he had voluntarily given up the position of Crown Prince. In this way, they would have one less competitor in the future. After a day of preparation, Chu Wuming, Xiao Chen, Zhang Qi, and the 2,000 battling Dragon Camp soldiers outside the imperial capital's teleportation formation early in the morning. They were all ready. Chu Wuming naturally had to bring along his battling Dragon Camp on this trip to Hulao Pass. It was unknown whether they were really too happy or just putting on an act. Early in the morning, Chu Wushuang and Chu Wuk actually personally came to send him off. The 3 brothers stood together and faced Chu Wuming, who was about to leave the imperial capital. Chu Wushuang said seriously, "Third brother, you have to be careful when you're alone outside." "That's right, third brother. Hulao Pass isn't like the imperial capital. It's constantly at war. You have to be careful. Chu Wushuang and Chu Wuk both put on an act and warned him. Chu Wuming also smiled in response. After exchanging a few words of farewell, Chu Wuming, Xiao Chen, and the others finally stepped into the teleportation formation. They could directly reach Hulao Pass through the imperial capital's teleportation formation. This way they could save a lot of time on the road. After watching Chu Wuming leave, Chu Wuk and Chu Wushuang also left one after another. Now that Chu Wuming was no longer around, the next battle would be between Chu Wushuang and Chu Wuk. After leaving the imperial capital's teleportation formation, Chu Wuk and an old man sat together in a carriage. The old man looked at Chu Wuk and said with some doubt, "Your Highness, this old man feels that the third prince's departure from the imperial capital isn't as simple as it seems on the surface. With the third prince's character, he shouldn't have chosen to let go so easily." This old man had many questions in his heart regarding Chu Wuming's departure. However, after hearing his words, Chu Wuk said indifferently, "I don't care what he's thinking. However, since he has already left the imperial capital, do you think I will let him return so easily? Don't bother about him for now. Right now there is only one obstacle in front of me. As long as I get rid of Chu Wushuang, the position of Crown Prince will be in my bag." He didn't investigate Chu Wuming's motive for leaving the imperial capital. In Chu Wuk's opinion, since Chu Wuming had already left, he wouldn't be able to return to the imperial capital so easily. Compared to Chu Wuming, Chu Wuk was more concerned about Chu Wushuang. This was because, based on the current situation, the second prince Chu Wushuang was his only remaining opponent. As long as he dealt with Chu Wushuang, no one would be able to compete with him for the position of crown prince. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 413. Chu Wuming's departure did not ease the tense situation in the capital. Everyone knew this because with Chu Wuming's departure, the tripartite confrontation became a battle between two tigers. Seeing that they were only a step away from the position of crown prince, both Chu Wushuang and Chu Wushuang worked even harder. As long as they could eliminate the other party, the position of crown prince would be theirs. The competition for the position of crown prince became even more intense with Chu Wuming's departure. At the same time, the Burning Sky ruler did not leave the capital with Xiao Chen. Firstly, the Burning Sky ruler was now a retired emperor of the Moonless Empire. He could be said to be the protector of the empire. If he left with Xiao Chen, it would inevitably arouse Xiao Chen's suspicions. This would not benefit Xiao Chen in the future. Secondly, although Chu Wuming had left the capital, he would return sooner or later. The Burning Sky ruler's presence in the capital could serve as a deterrent. Not caring about the chaos in the capital after their departure, Xiao Chen and the others quickly arrived at Hulao Pass through the teleportation formation. As the border of the Moonless Empire, Hulao Pass was extremely far away from the imperial capital. Without the transmission formation, it would take at least 5 days to travel from the imperial capital to Hulao Pass, and this was calculated based on the speed of a super expert in the Tao Master realm. However, in the blink of an eye, they appeared in Hulao Pass. Hulao Pass was actually a valley surrounded by mountains on both sides. However, the area of the valley was very large. At a glance, one could not see the end of it. It was like a barren plain. This plain was the only way for the Moonless Empire and the Heavenly Wolf Empire to communicate. After all, there were towering mountains on both sides of Hulao Pass. Not to mention whether humans could pass through. Even if they could, there were many monstrous beasts living in these two mountains. If humans entered, they would most likely die. It was also because of Hulao Pass' natural geographical location that it became a battleground for military strategists. Regardless of whether it was the Moonless Empire or the Celestial Wolf Empire, they all wanted to control the entire Hulao Pass. Once they controlled Hulao Pass, it would be equivalent to having absolute initiative. The other side would become fish on the pillow. They could eat it whenever they wanted. Both empires were well aware of the importance of Hulao Pass. Hence, the two empires had deployed a large number of troops to guard this place. The Moonless Empire and the Sky Wolf Empire had over 1 million troops stationed at both ends of the large valley. Hence, Hulao Pass naturally became the battlefield where the two empires' armies fought. At the entrance of the Hulao Pass that belonged to the Moonless Empire, there were a total of 4 cities. These 4 cities were in the direction of the Hulao Pass of the Moonless Empire. The 4 border cities formed a triangle, firmly guarding Hulao Pass. At this moment, Xiao Chen and the others had arrived at one of the 4 border cities through the teleportation formation. It was called Jinshan City, and the army that controlled this city was the renowned Jinshan Army of the Moonless Empire. They had already received news of Chu Wuming's arrival in advance. Just as everyone stepped out of the teleportation formation, the generals of the Jinshan army were already waiting there. Seeing Chu Wuming walk over, a tall and muscular middle-aged general with a rough appearance strode forward. Behind him were 7 or 8 other generals of the Jinshan army. General Zhao Feng greets Your Highness, the third prince. This Zhao Feng was the general of the Jinshan army. He was in charge of managing the Jinshan army. Looking at the tall and muscular Zhao Feng with a rough appearance, Xiao Chen nodded in his heart. This person was indeed a valiant general. Furthermore, his cultivation had already reached the initial Dao sovereign realm. It was no wonder that the imperial family would let him guard Hulao Pass and control the Jinshan army alone. The military power of the 4 armies around Hulao Pass was naturally firmly controlled by the imperial family. Although the 4 great princes and the 8 great feudal lords in the imperial capital had great power, they actually did not have military power. The imperial family was not stupid. How could they let these powerful officials have military power? Therefore, the entire army of the Moonless Empire was controlled by the imperial family. Without the imperial family's order, even the 4 great princes could not mobilize a single soldier. Of course, this was excluding their own private soldiers. However, how many private soldiers could there be? Under normal circumstances, when there was no war, Jinshan City was guarded by Zhao Feng. Once a war broke out, the imperial family would send people from the imperial capital to guard it. At that time, the 4 great princes and the 8 great feudal lords would be able to command the Jinshan army in battle. Of course, military power and military power were 2 different concepts. After the war, the 4 great princes and the 8 great feudal lords would have to exchange the commander's seal with the imperial family. Facing Zhao Feng's salute, Chu Wuming nodded slightly and said, "General Zhao has worked hard." After exchanging a few polite words with Zhao Feng did not pay much attention to Xiao Chen and the others. Xiao Chen naturally did not care about this. He had already prepared a residence for Chu Wuming in advance. At the same time, Xiao Chen and the others naturally lived together with Chu Wuming. After all, to outsiders, Xiao Chen and the others' identities were Chu Wuming's personal guards. That night, Zhao Feng held a grand banquet. At the banquet, all the high-ranking generals of the Jinshan army were present. The third prince, Chu Wuming, sat at the main seat. As for Xiao Chen and Zhao Feng, they sat to his left and right. The atmosphere of the banquet was very lively. However, amidst this lively atmosphere, Xiao Chen could keenly feel that although Zhao Feng and the others were polite to Chu Wuming, there was not much respect. Thinking about it, Chu Mu did not give Chu Wuming the authority to command any army on this trip to Hulao Pass. To Zhao Feng and the others, Chu Mu only said that Chu Wuming had come to Hulao Pass to gain experience, and that the Jinshan army did not need to listen to Chu Wuming's commands. Chu Mu did not give Chu Wuming the authority to command the Jinshan army. Therefore, Zhao Feng naturally did not need to listen to Chu Wuming's orders. The banquet quickly ended in a joyous atmosphere. It was not until late at night that Xiao Chen and Chu Wuming returned to their residence together. In the next few days, Xiao Chen did not do anything special. He had just arrived at Hulao Pass, so it was best to first understand the situation here. Every day, in the eyes of outsiders, Xiao Chun and Chu Wuming had nothing to do. They drank and strolled around all day. However, in secret, Zhang Qi and the others had already begun to move. A total of 5 days passed. On this day, Zhang Qi and the others returned one after another. They also truthfully reported the general situation of Hulao Pass to Xiao Qin. After hearing Zhang Qi and the others' report, a faint smile appeared at the corner of Xiao Qin's mouth. He immediately spoke to Zhang Qi. "Go and invite His Highness over. Tell him that I have something to discuss with him." Asking Chu Wuming to come and find him was clearly not the action of a subject. However, the relationship between Xiao Chun and Chu Wuming was indeed not that of a subject. Moreover, Chu Wuming also knew that Xiao Chen's ambition was not in the Moonless Empire. It was also impossible for him to seek any position in the Moonless Empire. Therefore, when facing Xiao Chen, Chu Wuming never felt that he was the ruler and Xiao Chen was the subject. Therefore, after hearing Zhang Qi's message, Chu Wuming did not mind at all and took the initiative to go to Xiao Chen's study. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 4:14. Chu Wuming soon came to the study, and the two sat opposite each other. Xiao Chen first told Chu Wuming the truth about the situation that Zhang Qi and the others knew. After hearing Xiao Chen's words, Chu Wuming asked, "What does brother Xiao Chen plan to do?" He didn't express his own opinion. Instead, he asked for Xiao Chen's opinion. After spending so much time with Xiao Chen, Chu Wuming had unknowingly begun to follow Xiao Chen's lead. Almost everything, as long as Xiao Chen proposed it, Chu Wuming wouldn't refuse. Hearing Chu Wuming's words, Xiao Chen said calmly, "First, subdue the mountain-suppressing army, then slowly plan." Xiao Chen directly expressed his thoughts. According to the current situation, Xiao Chen also knew that the 4 border cities of Hulao Pass, Jinshan City, Weiyuan City, Baiyan City, and Iron Armor City, all had an army guarding them. Among these 4 armies, the mountain-suppressing army of Jinshan City was Xiao Chen's first target. Not to mention that they were now in Jinshan City, according to the information that Zhang Qi and the others had gathered over the past few days, the mountain-suppressing army's commander-in-chief, Zhao Feng, was the easiest person to subdue. Zhao Feng was actually a soldier through and through. He only knew how to follow orders and had a stubborn personality. Although he looked stubborn at first glance, such people often didn't have any schemes and were easier to subdue. Xiao Chen planned to start with the mountain-suppressing army first. Chu Wuming didn't have any objections to this. However, subduing the mountain-suppressing army of 300,000 people wasn't something that could be done overnight. Moreover, Xiao Chen didn't plan to find Zhao Feng directly. If he wanted to subdue the mountain-suppressing army, he needed to do it bit by bit. Only by starting with Zhao Feng's subordinates could he guarantee that nothing would go wrong. He didn't hide anything from Chu Wuming. After listening to Xiao Chen's plan, Chu Wuming's eyes lit up. According to Xiao Chen's plan, there was indeed hope of subduing the mountain suppression army. After planning with Chu Wuming for an entire night, Xiao Chen personally sent Chu Wuming out of the study and said calmly, "Your Highness, you don't have to worry about these things. You just need to show up when needed." Xiao Chen was in charge of the entire plan. Chu Wuming only needed to convince Zhao Feng at the end. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Chu Wuming nodded slightly, but his expression was complicated as he looked at Xiao Chen. "Brother Xiao Chen, I've been wondering about something for the past 2 days." "Your Highness, please ask." "Brother Xiao Chen has great ambitions. I know that Brother Xiao won't stay in the Moonless Empire for long. I also know that compared to Brother Xiao, I'm far inferior in terms of talent, strength, and temperament. Although I know that Brother Xiao Chen doesn't think much of this small Moonless Empire, I still want to ask if Brother Xiao has ever thought of changing the name of the Moonless Empire?" The longer Chu Wuming interacted with Xiao Chen, the more he understood how terrifying Xiao Chen was. This Xiao Chen was a person without any flaws. With Xiao Chen's ability and the burning sky ruler behind him, it was actually a very simple matter if Xiao Chen wanted to replace the imperial family. However, as a member of the imperial family, Chu Wuming couldn't just watch as Xiao Chen forced the Chu family into a desperate situation. Therefore, he had been thinking about this question for the past few days. If Xiao Chen really had wild ambitions, then he would be the one who led the wolf into the house. Hearing Chu Wuming's words, Xiao Chen paused for a moment. He knew that Chu Wuming was starting to fear him. However, Xiao Chen soon burst into laughter. His laughter was filled with heroic spirit as he looked at the distant horizon. Xiao Chen laughed. Haha, Your Highness, do you know how big this world is? Although there are some things that I can't tell Your Highness, this Xiao can assure Your Highness that I have no intention of fighting for power. To be honest, the Moonless Empire is too small in this Xiao's eyes. How could this Xiao give up the entire world for this insignificant place? Therefore, Your Highness can rest assured that this Xiao has no intention of fighting for anything. The reason why I'm doing my best to help Your Highness is because Your Highness has done me a favor. Regarding the matter of the fifth prince, Your Highness didn't abandon this Xiao. This Xiao is very touched. Secondly, this Xiao really needs Your Highness to be in power because this Xiao has some relatives who will need to stay in the Moonless Empire in the future. They need Your Highness to take care of them. Chu Wuming was afraid that Xiao Chen would overthrow the imperial family. However, this was something that Xiao Chen had never thought about. The Moonless Empire, to be honest, Xiao Chen really didn't care about it. Xiao Chen came to the Tianhe continent to pursue the pinnacle of martial arts. As such, how could a small Moonless Empire enter his eyes? From Xiao Chen's words, Chu Wuming heard a strong sense of contempt. This was the contempt of the Moonless Empire. However, it was precisely because of this contempt that Chu Wuming's heart was relieved. Since he looked down on the Moonless Empire from the bottom of his heart, Xiao Chen naturally wouldn't do anything to fight for power. With a relieved smile on his face, Chu Wuming cupped his hands and said to Xiao Chen, "This palace understands. I hope Brother Xiao Chen won't blame me. In the future, if Brother Xiao Chen wants to command me, this palace will do my best." It could be said that he had completely let down his guard against Xiao Chen. Hearing Chu Wuming's words, Xiao Chen also smiled and said, "This Xiao doesn't need Your Highness to do anything for me. I only need Your Highness to help me take care of some relatives and friends in the future." Xiao Chen didn't tell Chu Wuming that he came from the Tianhe continent. This was something that Xiao Chen wouldn't tell anyone. However, Xiao Chen did tell Chu Wuming that he needed him to take care of some of his relatives and friends in the future. It could be considered an open conversation. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Chu Wuming solemnly nodded his head in response. Soon after, he walked away. After watching Chu Wuming leave, the smile on Xiao Chen's face slowly disappeared. Since he had already determined his target, Xiao Chen also planned to take action. Taking the initiative to subdue the mountain-suppressing army meant that Chu Wuming would be able to gain a firm foothold in Hulao Pass sooner. "Senior Zhang Qi," Xiao Chen softly called out. Following his voice, Zhang Qi appeared in front of Xiao Chen out of thin air. Looking at Zhang Qi, Xiao Chen's expression was calm as he said, "You can begin. Act according to the plan." "Yes, young master." Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Zhang Qi respectfully replied. After grasping the situation of the mountain-suppressing army, Xiao Chen formulated a perfect plan. Today, the plan began to be implemented. That night, a sound transmission talisman was secretly sent back to the Imperial City's heavenly stellar residence. After receiving the sound transmission talisman, Sikong Ming immediately began to act. In order to subdue the mountain-suppressing army, the most crucial point was that he needed the help of one person in the Imperial City. No one would have thought that this person was the fifth prince's mother, the current imperial concubine Chu. After receiving Xiao Chen's message, Ming began to act according to Xiao Chen's instructions. Facing Xiao Chen's instructions, the difficulty of the task wasn't very high. With Ming's methods, it was very easy to complete. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 4:15. After receiving Xiao Chen's message, Ming quickly contacted the seventh prince in secret. The seventh prince was one of Chu Wuming's people, so he naturally wouldn't reject Ming's request. Using the seventh prince's power, Ming bribed the fifth prince's mother, imperial concubine Chu's personal maid that night. This maid was called Chun Hua, and she was deeply loved and trusted by imperial concubine Chu. After being bribed by Ming, Chun Hua followed Xiao Chen's plan and told imperial concubine Chu that Xiao Chen was currently in Jinshan City in Hulao Pass, and the deputy general of the Jinshan army, Zhao Tuo, had some relationship with her. If imperial concubine Chu could fork out some money and was willing to personally write a letter to him, he would definitely assassinate Xiao Chen. Furthermore, Xiao Chen was currently in the Jinshan army's territory, so General Zhao Tuo's chances of success were very high. Hearing Chun Hua's words, imperial concubine Chu was indeed moved. After her son was killed, imperial concubine Chu's position in the palace instantly plummeted. After all, in the royal family, there were many times when a mother's status depended on her son. Now that imperial concubine Chu's son was dead, imperial concubine Chu naturally had no value. Furthermore, Chu Mu had already declared Xiao Chen innocent. As a result, the killing intent in imperial concubine Chu's heart had never dissipated. Even in her dreams, she wanted to kill Xiao Chen to avenge the fifth prince. She had always wanted to kill Xiao Chen, and now she finally had the chance to do so. Imperial concubine Chu agreed to Chun Hua's proposal without a hitch. She personally wrote a letter and had someone secretly deliver it to Jinshan City in Hulao Pass to General Zhao. Imperial concubine Chu was already moved. On the other side, General Zhao Tuo could be considered an absolute core figure in the Jinshan army. However, Zhao Tuo didn't rely on his own strength to be able to enter the upper echelons of the Jinshan army, but it was because of Zhao Feng. The two of them were blood brothers, and their parents had passed away when Zhao Tuo was just born. Therefore, Zhao Tuo could be said to be raised by Zhao Feng. Therefore, Zhao Feng could be said to be Zhao Tuo's elder brother and father. It was because of this that Zhao Feng spoiled Zhao Tuo a lot. Under Zhao Feng's care, Zhao Tuo had become a true upper echelon of the mountain-suppressing army. His position was only below Zhao Feng's. However, compared to Zhao Feng, Zhao Tuo was extremely greedy and arrogant. It was because of this that Xiao Chen chose him. From what they knew so far, Zhao Feng was an extremely stubborn person. Although he wasn't completely loyal to the Imperials, it was impossible to recruit Zhao Feng directly. Therefore, the only way to get Zhao Feng to join them was through Zhao Tuo. After waiting quietly in Hulao Pass for half a month, the person sent by imperial concubine Chu finally met with Zhao Tuo in secret. Because this matter couldn't be discovered, the person sent by imperial concubine Chu couldn't use the teleportation array. Every time the teleportation array was used, there would be a special official in charge of recording it. Therefore, the person sent by imperial concubine Chu could only go all the way from the imperial capital to Hulao Pass. In this way, half a month wasn't considered slow. After all, it was a long journey. Along the way, there were people from Tianshan residents secretly monitoring this person. Therefore, when the person sent by imperial concubine Chu entered Jinshan City, Xiao Chen had already received the news. He's finally here? Very good. Hearing this news, Xiao Chen smiled faintly. Since the person had arrived, the plan could officially start. There was no need to worry that Zhao Tuo would refuse because this person was greedy. In order to kill Xiao Chen, imperial concubine Chu had spent a lot of money. In the face of such a generous reward, Zhao Tuo agreed without thinking. After persuading Zhao Tuo, the person from the temple left Jinshan City. After receiving the deposit from Imperial concubine Chu, Zhao Tuo played with the interspatial ring given by Imperial concubine Chu in his mansion while thinking about how to deal with Xiao Chun. Xiao Chun was one of Chu Wuming's people. Zhao Tuo naturally knew that he couldn't make a move in public. He could only assassinate him. After thinking about it, Zhao Tuo finally decided to make a move tonight. Anyway, Xiao Chun was only at the Dao querying realm. Killing him was as easy as flipping his hand in Zhao Tuo's opinion. Zhao Tuo didn't know what happened to Xiao Chun in the imperial capital. Therefore, he didn't take Xiao Chun seriously at all. After making a decision, Zhao Tuo quickly gathered more than 10 of his trusted aides. The lowest cultivation was at the Dao querying realm. Together with Zhao Tuo himself, Zhao Tuo believed that it was foolproof to kill a small Dao querying realm cultivator with such strength. After making a decision, Zhao Tuo led the group to secretly sneak into Xiao Chen's courtyard that night. There were no accidents along the way. Zhao Tuo and the group arrived outside Xiao Chen's room smoothly. Things progressed more smoothly than expected. Of course, Zhao Tuo didn't know that this was all deliberately arranged by Xiao Chen. Otherwise, with the strength of the people from the heavenly stellar residence, Zhao Tuo and the others wouldn't even be able to enter the courtyard, let alone reach Xiao Chen's room. Zhao Tuo deliberately let Zhao Tuo and the others in. Looking at the tightly shut door in front of him, Zhao Tuo nodded slightly to the person beside him and whispered, "Do it. Remember, do it cleanly. Don't leave any evidence." Hearing Zhao Tuo's words, the person nodded slightly. Then, his figure moved and he immediately rushed into the room. He had already inquired about Xiao Chen's residence. At this moment, the room was still lit with soft candlelight. The light illuminated the entire room very clearly. Just as the person rushed into the room, he looked around and found that there was no one in the room. Immediately, the person felt that something was wrong. He turned his head and shouted to Zhao Tuo, "General, there is no one in the room. Something is wrong." The room was lit by candlelight, but there was no one in sight. Hearing the person's words, Zhao Tuo frowned and strode into the room. After personally confirming, Zhao Tuo also felt that something was wrong. He immediately said in a deep voice, "Let's go." The situation was a little strange. Zhao Tuo immediately chose to retreat. However, just as Zhao Tuo was about to leave, several figures quickly flew out from outside the courtyard. The person in the lead was Xiao Chun. Beside Xiao Chun, Zhang Qi, Gu Xiu and the others were already waiting for him. With his escape route blocked, Zhao Tuo's face darkened. At the same time, Xiao Chen also said with a cold smile, "General Zhao, you came in the middle of the night with a knife and a spear. What do you want? Do you want to assassinate me?" All of this was originally planned by Xiao Chen, so he naturally knew the purpose of Zhao Tuo's visit. However, Zhao Tuo didn't know. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Zhao Tuo was stunned at first, but soon he said with a smile on his face, "Young Master Xiao, what are you talking about? How could this general come to assassinate you? It's just that I suddenly remembered something tonight and specially came to ask for your advice. How could I know that you are not here? We were just about to leave. Please collect, please vote, please recommend." Chapter 4:16. He was completely lying through his teeth. When he heard Zhao Tuo, Xiao Chen smiled spuriously as he looked at Zhao Tuo and said, "Could it be that General Zhao takes me for a 3-year-old child? Do you think I'll believe such a far-fetched reason?" A strand of coldness flashed through Zhao Tuo's eyes when he saw Xiao Chen didn't believe him. Who would have imagined that he would actually be stopped here by Xiao Chen tonight? A cold light flickered in his eyes as he sneered and said, "Young Master Xiao, what's the meaning of this? Since young Master Xiao doesn't believe me, then I'll bid my farewells." The assassination had failed, and Zhao Tuo was very clearly aware that Xiao Chen didn't have any evidence at all. Even if Zhao Tuo and the others had weapons in their hands, so what? So long as he didn't admit it, what could Xiao Chen do? No matter what, He couldn't expose that he had come to assassinate Xiao Chen tonight. This was what Zhao Tuo was thinking at this moment. So long as he refused to admit it, what could Xiao Chen do? Needless to say, Zhao Tuo's idea was very good. However, he'd overlooked something, and it was that this entire matter had been planned by Xiao Chen. In that way, how could there be no evidence? Right when Zhao Tuo was about to leave, Gu Xiu and the others took a step forward and blocked Zhao Tuo's path. He was able to discern that Gu Xiu was a Dao King realm expert, so Zhao Tuo didn't dare act rashly. He could only turn around and glare angrily at Xiao Chen as he said, "Young Master Xiao, what's the meaning of this? Could it be that you intend to force me to stay? A thief crying thief." He'd originally come to assassinate Xiao Chen, and after the matter was exposed, Zhao Tuo was the first to flare up because he wanted to rely on his rage to leave as soon as possible. Xiao Chen didn't care at all when facing Zhao Tuo's furious gaze. He withdrew a letter and waved it in his hand as he said, "General Zhao recognizes this letter, right?" Seeing the letter in Xiao Chen's hand, Zhao Tuo's face immediately changed. His original anger dissipated in an instant and was replaced by a look of horror. There was no doubt that the letter in Xiao Chen's hand was the letter that Imperial Consort Chu had personally written to Zhao Tu. When Zhao Tuo had just left the mansion, Xiao Chen had asked Zhang Qi to bring it back. This was an important piece of evidence. Zhao Tuo never thought that the letter would fall into Xiao Chen's hands. Looking at Xiao Chen's faint smile, Zhao Tuo felt the world spinning. He originally intended to deny it, but now that the other party had the evidence, his face was completely pale. Seeing this, Xiao Chen immediately shouted, "Zhao Tuo, you sneaked into this place tonight with the intention of assassinating me. Why are you still not admitting to it?" The evidence was irrefutable. Faced with such a situation, Zhao Tuo could no longer deny it. His expression was ugly as he remained silent. Subsequently, Xiao Chen could not be bothered to talk nonsense with him. He directly gave the order to capture Zhao Tuo and the others. Receiving Xiao Chen's order, Zhang Qi and the others instantly took action. With Zhang Qi taking action, Zhao Tuo and the others were naturally not their match and were quickly captured. After tying up Zhao Tuo and the others, Xiao Chen did not bother with Zhao Tuo anymore. Leaving Gu Xiu to guard Zhao Tuo and the others, Xiao Chen left. Now that Zhao Tuo had been captured and the evidence was irrefutable, it was time to inform General Zhao Feng. Early the next morning, Xiao Chen sent someone to inform Zhao Feng. It was a very simple sentence. Zhao Tuo had attempted to kill him and had been captured. At the same time, the third prince was also extremely angry and said that he would behead Zhao Tuo in public. Hearing this news, Zhao Feng sat down on a chair in the general's mansion and said with a dazed expression, "Zhao Tuo really went to kill young master Xiao Chen?" "Absolutely." Hearing Zhao Feng's words, a general in front of him nodded his head and replied, "Damn it, how could this guy be so stupid? He actually went to assassinate young master Xiao Chen. Damn it, how preposterous." Zhao Feng cursed angrily. "General, it's not just that. I heard that the third prince is extremely angry because of this and has already said that he will behead General Zhao Tuo in public." Chu Wuming was extremely angry and Zhao Tuo had been captured alive by Xiao Chen. Hearing this, Zhao Feng felt as if the world in front of him was spinning. After a while, Zhao Feng took a deep breath and said, I'll go to His Highness' residence." Zhao Tuo's actions made Zhao Feng both angry and scared. After thinking for a while, Zhao Feng decided to go to Chu Wuming personally. There was no other way. Although Zhao Tuo had done such a stupid thing, he was still his brother. How could Zhao Feng just watch Zhao Tuo be beheaded without doing anything? Zhao Feng hurriedly went to Chu Wuming's residence. In the main hall, Zhao Feng saw Chu Wuming sitting on the main seat. As soon as he entered, Zhao Feng immediately knelt down on the ground and said in an extremely respectful tone, "Guilty General Zhao Feng greets His Highness." Compared to before, Zhao Feng's attitude this time was obviously much more respectful. One had to know that when Zhao Feng saw Chu Wuming before, he had only cupped his hands and bowed. He had never knelt down so respectfully before. Facing Zhao Feng, who was so respectfully kneeling in front of him, Chu Wuming pretended to be angry and coldly harumphed. General Zhao is really good at leading troop. Hearing this, small beads of sweat appeared on Zhao Feng's forehead. If it was any other time, Zhao Feng obviously wouldn't be so afraid of Chu Wuming. After all, although Chu Wuming was a prince, he didn't have any military power and couldn't control Zhao Feng. However, it was different now. Zhao Tuo's life was in Chu Wuming's hands. Once this matter was spread to the capital, Zhao Feng wouldn't be able to escape the blame. Zhao Feng lowered his head deeply and didn't dare to reply. Seeing this, Chu Wuming continued to shout. General Zhao, as a general, you allowed your subordinates to do whatever they want. As a brother, you allowed your brother to assassinate my trusted aide. You tell me yourself, how should I handle this matter? Hearing Chu Wuming's words, Zhao Feng could only kowtow and admit his wrongs. Seeing this, Chu Wuming lightly sighed, and his tone became gentler as he spoke. General Zhao, the evidence of this matter is irrefutable. Zhao Tuo wanted to assassinate brother Shao Qin. I can't help you with this matter, but I can tell you clearly that if brother Shao Qin insists on killing Zhao Tuo, it's useless even if you go to the capital to beg for mercy. Do you know that brother Shao Qin's uncle is the Burning Sky retired emperor who just ascended to the throne a few days ago? Chu Wuming didn't scold Zhao Feng anymore, but he brought out the name of the Burning Sky ruler. Hearing this, Zhao Feng's face turned ashen. It's over, it's really over. Who would have thought that Shao Qin's uncle would be the Burning Sky retired emperor? Assassinating the retired emperor's nephew was something that even 100 lives wouldn't be enough. Furthermore, even Chu Mu probably wouldn't be able to protect Zhao Tuo. Zhao Feng's face was ashen as he fell onto the ground. It was as if all the energy in his body had been sucked out. Seeing that Zhao Feng was in complete despair, Chu Wuming spoke at the right time. General Zhao, now that things have reached this point, there's only one way to save your brother Zhao Tuo. I urgently need the help of a great talent like General Zhao. If General Zhao agrees, then we'll be family. If that's the case, I'm willing to personally come out and solve this matter for General. Begging for your collection, begging for your monthly votes, begging for your recommendation. Chapter 4:17. Seeing that the time was right, Chu Wuming threw out an olive branch. Hearing Chu Wuming's words, Zhao Feng, who was originally ashen-faced, looked strangely at Chu Wuming, who was sitting on the main seat. Chu Wuming's words were very obvious. As long as Zhao Feng surrendered, Zhao Tuo would naturally be fine. Zhao Feng looked at Chu Wuming in a daze. It was only at this moment that Zhao Feng finally realized the crux of the matter. At first, Zhao Feng was too worried about Zhao Tuo's safety, so he didn't think too much about it. Now that he thought about it carefully, the entire matter was full of suspicious points. Furthermore, from the beginning to the end, Shao Qin seemed to have been prepared. Otherwise, how could he have captured Zhao Tuo so easily? Also, how did Shao Qin know about Imperial Consort Chu's letter? To be honest, Shao Qin's plan wasn't very smart, so even a general like Zhao Feng could easily see through it. However, this was where Shao Qin's plan was smart. Even if Zhao Feng saw through it, so what? He didn't have any other choice. He guessed that this entire matter was probably planned by Shao Qin and Chu Wuming. They purposely lured Zhao Tuo, and their ultimate goal was to subdue Zhao Feng. Zhao Feng looked at Chu Wuming in disbelief. Although he guarded Hulao Pass all year round, Zhao Feng had heard a little about the battle for the position of Crown Prince. He didn't expect the third prince, Chu Wuming, to be so ambitious. Zhao Feng didn't believe that Chu Wuming was purely trying to recruit him. Chu Wuming's ultimate goal was obviously the 300,000 soldiers of the mountain-suppressing army. In other words, Chu Wuming wanted to recruit him to take control of the mountain-suppressing army. The other princes were still fighting to the death in the imperial capital. They only had the position of crown prince in their eyes, but Chu Wuming was already thinking about taking control of the army. In comparison, Chu Wuming's ambition. Of course, Zhao Feng didn't know that all of this was planned by Shao Qin. As for Chu Wuming, he was just following orders. Chu Wuming didn't rush Zhao Feng and waited patiently. After a while, Zhao Feng took a deep breath and finally spoke. Zhao Feng slowly stood up and once again respectfully knelt down toward Chu Wuming and shouted, "Zhao and all the soldiers of the mountain-suppressing army are willing to die for the third prince." Just as Shao Chun had thought, even if Zhao Feng had guessed everything in the end, what was done could not be undone. Zhao Feng had no choice but to rely on Chu Wuming. Hearing Zhao Feng's words, Chu Wuming faintly smiled. He quickly walked up to Zhao Feng and personally helped him up, a smile on his face. "General Zhao is too polite. We'll be on the same side from now on, haha." Hearing Chu Wuming's words, Zhao Feng helplessly smiled bitterly. This was something that could not be helped. Otherwise, why would Zhao Feng rely on Chu Wuming? One had to know that if Chu Mu found out that Zhao Feng, who possessed a large number of troops, had secretly sided with Chu Wuming, he would undoubtedly die. After successfully subduing Zhao Feng, Zhao Tuo was soon released and personally sent the two brothers out of the courtyard. Before they left, Chu Wuming said faintly, "General Zhao, I would like to go to the barracks tomorrow to take a look." Hearing Chu Wuming's words, Zhao Feng paused for a moment, but he soon nodded his head respectfully and replied, "This general obeys." If it was before, Zhao Feng would definitely not agree to Chu Wuming going to the barracks. But now, Zhao Feng had no choice. The reason why Chu Wuming wanted to go to the barracks was because he wanted to see Zhao Feng's attitude. Nodding his head in satisfaction, Chu Wuming sent Zhao Feng and his brother off with his eyes. On the way back to the mountain-protecting general's palace, the two brothers sat facing each other in the garden. Zhao Tuo looked at his big brother and said with surprise, "Brother, you really sided with the third prince? If His Majesty knows about this, you..." From Zhao Feng's mouth, Zhao Tuo already knew that he had sided with Chu Wuming. Facing his brother's surprise, Zhao Feng said helplessly, "Do you think I want to? Who would have thought? No one would have thought that the seemingly weak third prince would have such method. His ambition has reached such a level that he has already begun to plot to seize the emperor's military power." Zhao Feng didn't have a choice in today's matter. If he didn't side with the third prince, he would die. As soon as he finished speaking, Zhao Feng looked at Zhao Tuo and said with determination, "Forget it. Remember, from today onwards, you and I are both the third prince's people. We can't be disrespectful to His Majesty anymore." As expected of someone who could become the general of an army, after the initial gloominess and helplessness, Zhao Feng quickly made up his mind. Since what was done couldn't be undone, Zhao Feng didn't have a second path to take. He could only wholeheartedly support the third prince. This way, when the third prince gained power in the future, Zhao Feng might be able to reach the heavens in one step. Zhao Feng made up his mind. At the same time, far away in the imperial capital, Xikong Ming and imperial concubine Chu were sitting together in a private room in a normal restaurant. This morning, Xikong Ming asked the seventh prince to invite imperial concubine Chu out of the palace. Imperial concubine Chu didn't refuse the seventh prince's invitation because she didn't have the right to refuse. This was because the seventh prince said to her, "Hulao Pass, Zhenshan City, General Zhao Tuo's assassination failed." Because of this sentence, imperial concubine Chu couldn't refuse the seventh prince's request. Helplessly, imperial concubine Chu could only leave the palace and come to this restaurant at the agreed time. Looking at Xikong Ming, imperial concubine Chu's eyes were full of coldness. However, Xikong Ming acted as if he didn't see it and said with a faint smile on his face, "This old man is Xikong Ming, the manager of the Heavenly Stellar Residence. Young Master Shao Chun sent me to greet imperial concubine Chu." Xikong Ming reported his identity. Hearing this, Imperial concubine Chu's face sank. She was already full of anger. Now that she heard that Sikong Ming was Xiao Chen's man, she couldn't control herself anymore. Her face sank as she said, "Xiao Chen, what does he want? My son has already died in his hands. Does he not want to let me go?" Knowing that the matter between her and Zhao Tu had been exposed, Imperial concubine Chu naturally felt that Xiao Chen wanted to deal with her. Facing Imperial concubine Chu's angry shout, Sikong Ming continued to speak with a smile. Imperial concubine Chu has misunderstood. Young master knows that Imperial concubine Chu has always been brooding over the matter of the fifth prince. However, has Imperial concubine Chu thought that if the fifth prince hadn't sullied young master's sister first, young master wouldn't have tried to kill the fifth prince. The matter has already passed. Moreover, young master doesn't plan to pursue the matter this time. However, young master asked this old man to pass on a message to Imperial concubine Chu. It's better for Imperial concubine Chu to let go of the past hatred. Of course, if Imperial concubine Chu can't let go, then if the matter of Imperial concubine Chu attempting to kill the Grand Imperial nephew spreads to the Imperial capital, I think Imperial concubine Chu should know the consequences. That's all I have to say. I hope Imperial concubine Chu is a reasonable person. This old man will take his leave now. Please collect, vote, recommend me. Chapter 4:18. After Zhao Feng surrendered, Xiao Chen also asked Sikong Ming to warn Imperial concubine Chu. Although Xiao Chen was not afraid of her, as the saying goes, "Don't be afraid of thieves, but be afraid of thieves." It was not a good thing to have someone in the imperial capital always thinking about how to kill him. What's more, Xiao Chen planned to let his parents live in the Moonless Empire in the future. Therefore, Xiao Chen would never allow any potential danger in the Moonless Empire, especially in the imperial capital. This time, Sikong Ming's warning was already Xiao Chen giving Imperial concubine Chu a chance. If she still could not let go of the hatred in her heart, then Xiao Chen could only kill her. Anyway, with Xiao Chen's means, it was not difficult to kill Imperial concubine Chu. With Sikong Ming's departure, Imperial concubine Chu struggled in her heart. After a while, Imperial concubine Chu leaned on the chair with a pale face. From her eyes, there was no longer any hatred, only deep despair and powerlessness. Although she only exchanged a few words with Sikong Ming, Imperial concubine Chu also understood that she could no longer pose any threat to Xiao Chen. Today's conversation was also Xiao Chen's last warning to her. If she still did not let go, then Xiao Chen could only kill her. Son, mother is useless. Leaning on the chair, Imperial concubine Chu's eyes had 2 lines of tears as she muttered to herself. On the second day after Sikong Ming and Imperial concubine Chu's conversation, Imperial concubine Chu asked Chu Mu to guard her son's coffin. She would never step out of the 5th prince's mausoleum again. Chu Mu did not care about Imperial concubine Chu's request at all. After all, Chu Mu had countless women in the harem. If Imperial concubine Chu wanted to leave, then let her go. At the same time, Xiao Chen, who was in Jinshan City, also received the news. Xiao Chen was very satisfied with Imperial concubine Chu's decision. This was equivalent to Imperial concubine Chu's answer to Xiao Chen. He no longer cared about Imperial concubine Chu and had complete control of the mountain-suppressing army. Zhao Feng was also very smart. Ever since he joined Chu Wuming, he had indeed listened to everything Chu Wuming said. For the time being, he had no plans to touch the other 3 armies. Now that he had subdued the mountain-subduing army, everything else could only be done slowly. In Jinshan City, Xiao Chen's life was peaceful and stable. At the same time, Xiao Chen's cultivation was also improving steadily. Xiao Chen didn't have to worry about cultivation resources at all. As long as he needed it, Chu Wuming would find it for Xiao Chen. With the support of so many cultivation resources, Xiao Chen's cultivation reached the peak of the Dao querying realm in just 1 month. He was not far from breaking through to the small success Dao querying realm. It had only been less than 2 months since Xiao Chen had broken through to the Dao querying realm, but he had already touched the threshold of the initial Dao querying realm. Such speed was not only because of Xiao Chen's heaven-defying talent, but also because of the cultivation resources provided by Chu Wuming. Such a fast cultivation speed was enough to make anyone gasp in amazement. Xiao Chen also deeply understood the importance of a cultivation environment and resources to a warrior. It was no exaggeration to say that Xiao Chen's cultivation speed would definitely not be so fast in the heavenly Chen continent. This was because many of the cultivation resources Xiao Chen had used during this period of time were never available in the heavenly Chen continent. Unknowingly, 1.5 months had passed in Jinshan City. On this day, Chu Wuming was preparing to return to the imperial capital. This was because he had reached the time to break through to the Dao querying realm. He was going to return to the imperial capital and enter the Dao path to break through to the Dao querying realm. The day before he left, Chu Wuming called Zhao Feng to his residence. At the same time, Xiao Chen was also present. Chu Wuming said with a smile as he looked at Zhao Feng, "Tomorrow, I will return to the imperial capital to break through to the Dao querying realm. During my absence, General Zhao will listen to Brother Xiao Chen's arrangements. Remember, Brother Xiao Chen's words are equivalent to my words. There is no need to report to me." Chu Wuming was going to leave for a period of time and handed over all authority to Xiao Chen without reservation. Hearing his words, Zhao Feng respectfully nodded. "I will follow your Highness' orders." After giving instructions, Chu Wuming returned to the imperial capital the next day. Xiao Chen did not think too much about Chu Wuming's departure. After all, Chu Wuming would not be gone for a long time. At least a few days, at most half a month, Chu Wuming would return. Just like before, he spent every day cultivating. 3 days passed in a row. However, on this day, Zhao Feng suddenly came to visit. Hearing that Zhao Feng was looking for him, Xiao Chen asked someone to bring him in. Zhao Feng quickly strode into the courtyard. He first bowed respectfully to Xiao Chen, then spoke in a deep voice. "Young Master Xiao Chen, according to our scouts, the Heavenly Wolf Empire has made some strange movements. They probably want to fight with us." Over the past few days, the Heavenly Wolf Empire had stationed 400,000 soldiers at Hulao Pass. They had split into 4 groups and were advancing. After receiving this news, Zhao Feng immediately came to report it to Xiao Chen. Zhao Feng was not surprised by the Heavenly Wolf Empire's actions. After all, both sides faced off against Hulao Pass. Small-scale battles like this happened from time to time. Sometimes, the Moonless Empire would take the initiative to attack, while other times, the Heavenly Wolf Empire would take the initiative to attack. Of course, there was no clear winner or loser in these battles. Both sides were just probing each other. If it was in the past, Zhao Feng obviously would not have come to report such a matter. However, now that he had joined Chu Wuming, Zhao Feng naturally could not act on his own. Hearing Zhao Feng's words, Xiao Chen also knew that such situations happened from time to time at Hulao Pass, so he did not pay too much attention to it. "General Zhao, act according to procedure." Immediately, the Moonless Empire naturally had a plan to deal with the Heavenly Wolf Empire's attack. First, the 4 armies would report the situation to the imperial capital. After Chu Mu gave the order, the 4 armies could move out to meet the enemy. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Zhao Feng respectfully nodded his head. Immediately after, the 4 armies of Hulao Pass all reported the Heavenly Wolf Empire's attack to the imperial capital. Soon, Chu Mu's order came down for the 4 armies to move out to meet the enemy. Chu Mu was already used to such small-scale battles, so he did not care at all. However, without Chu Mu's order, Zhao Feng and the others had no right to mobilize the troops. Therefore, according to the rules, they had to report the matter to Chu Mu. After receiving Chu Mu's order, Zhao Feng immediately ordered a general of the mountain-suppressing army to lead 100,000 soldiers out of mountain-suppressing city and rush to the front lines to meet the Heavenly Wolf Empire. This kind of battle was as simple as eating a meal for Zhao Feng. As the mountain-suppressing army left the city to meet the enemy, Xiaoqin, who was in the city, suddenly had the urge to go to the front lines and personally witness the battle between the Moonless Empire and the Heavenly Wolf Empire. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.